bits and bobs before we actually get into the meeting. There are councillors in the public gallery, and there is a roving microphone, and they are waving, so we know that they're not on mute, and they can indicate that they can see and hear us down here. Apologies that you are up there, but for obvious reasons, we are still maintaining a little bit of social distancing. But needless to say, Deputy Mayor, Democratic Services will be keeping an eye on you guys up there. And if there's anybody in the chamber wishes to speak, press your button as you would do normally. I might defer the chamber speakers to the gallery. It's not because they are jumping in ahead of you, it's because they have jumped in ahead of you, if that makes sense. So this is my first time as the mayor in this chamber, and it's quite a sensitive moment, I think, for all of us in public life and public service. I think it is fitting that we are sat here with the mace in front of the mayor for the first time in this civic year. The mace is the authority of the borough, comes from Queen Victoria, and it's set there because the mayor is in chair of the session. But I think because of the events of last week, and I've discussed this with the leader of the council, the leader of the Conservative group, and the leader of the PAB group, I think because of what happened last week and how it has affected everybody who puts their name forward to stand for public life, I think that we will do something now, but I'll briefly explain what I've already done, which was Friday when I heard the tragic news about Sir David Amess. I contacted Alex Chalk, copied to the leaders of the parties in the chamber, to express my condolences and sympathy to Alex as a colleague of Sir David. I actually met Alex yesterday at an event in Cheltenham, and I don't think he'll mind me saying that he is still visibly shaken. And I think he was still performing his public duties yesterday with me, and a whole bunch of the chain gang, plus a deputy lieutenant, plus the High Sheriff of Gloucestershire. And I think that's the key message that we need to get across, is no matter what happens to any of us, and I regard an attack on a publicly elected individual as being one of us, it's not party political. I think we've all suffered over the years. But what I would like you to do, please, is rise with me, and we'll have a minute's silence in the memory of Sir David Amess. Colleagues, thank you so much. That was meticulously observed, as we would expect from Cheltenham. Further to that, I will be writing to Lady Amess and her 5 children to express the sorrow of the members of the Borough of Cheltenham, and the fact that we observed a minute's silence for what turns out to have been a really, really good public servant. And we had our Mr. Cheltenham in Charles Irving, and they had their Sir David. So I will pass on our condolences. Okay, thank you. I will now move into our meeting proper. I have a War and Peace version of apologies, which I will rattle out, in that Councillors Baker, Barnes, Bassett-Smith, Boys, Britta, Clark, Hegenbarth, Morthlin, Pinniger, Samkey and Wilkinson send their apologies. Does anybody else have any other apologies they wish to note? Councillor Hay, leader?
Councillor Britta.
Yeah. But thanks for checking. Keep me awake. Without going into too much detail, there are a number of councillors not here because of reasons to do with COVID and so on. But one of our number, Councillor Julie Sankey, has lost her father only in the last couple of days. And that's why she's not here. And I think it would also, I'm not going to ask us to stand, but I think it ought to be recorded that our expressions of condolence be passed on to Councillor Sankey on the loss of her father. I lost my father-in-law 6 months ago and my father a few years ago, so I know exactly what that's like. But if that could just be recorded, please, that would be great. Thank you. I've also been told that Councillor Savage may be late for the meeting, so we'll see Louis when he gets here. Right, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest that they need to share with the rest of us? Councillor Nelson up in the gallery.
Non-pecuniary, agenda item 11.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I've got Councillor Babbage and I've also got Councillor Brownstein.
To declare a non-pecuniary interest on the motions as a trustee of the Gloucestershire NHS Foundation Trust.
Thank you. Councillor Brownstein.
Just to declare that one of the motions relates to the NHS, and my wife is an employee of the Cheltenham Gloucestershire Trust, or Gloucestershire Trust, I can't remember what it's called, just to get that on record. Thanks.
Thank you. It is confusing, Johnny, because there are 3 different employers for the NHS. Because there's the Trust, there's NHS Central, and there's NHS England. So, yeah, we'll sort these out as we go along as well, but thank you for that. Can I move on in that case? No other declarations of interest? Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. Councillor Brownstein has gone through them, as I expect him to, as a member of the Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee, and he's going to say something about the minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a former member of the Audit Committee. This is on page 19 of the agenda pack. Just in relation to the 20s Plenties motion, I don't remember every word that was spoken in that motion, so I don't know whether or not I'm being pedantic. But there's a comment here that says the County Council has already accepted a very similar motion, and that's not factually true. I don't recall whether or not I don't know if it's true that a member expressed that, but as a statement, it's not correct. The County Council did not accept that motion. So I'm not sure what needs to happen next, whether or not someone needs to kind of review the comments that were made and tweak a wording. But it's not accurate, and I just wanted to bring that to Council's attention.
Okay, thank you. Looking for Dem Services. Sorry, Harry. Yep, that's been noted, Councillor Brownstein, and I've been assured it'll be amended, so thank you for that. Does anybody else have any other comments you'd like to raise on the last minutes before I sign them? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll sign the minutes later. I'm keeping away from Tim, don't know where he's been. Communications by the Mayor. I did have a number, which I'm going to curtail for obvious reasons, I hope. I would like to thank all of those councillors that came to the recent Mayor's Charity Evening, and those that couldn't come who donated their admission ticket, thank you. Those that couldn't come but sent a donation, thank you so much. That was very much appreciated. And we raised, I think, nearly £600 on the evening for the Mayor's Charity, and I think that was absolutely fantastic. And it was my first charity event in person, so, and it was actually a very good evening. So it's a shout out for next year's event, which won't be me, it'll be somebody else, obviously. But thank you to all councillors that did attend on the evening and those that couldn't for their support. I would like to record that Councillor Angela Boys, who's not here at the moment, has been re-elected to the Council of Europe. And I think that is worthy of a mention from the Mayor. And I think, unless the leader's looking at me to say, I was going to say that, Steve. You weren't, were you? You were, yeah. Well done to Councillor Boyce. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we have a foot in Europe. It's not the EU, for those that don't understand the differences between the Council and the EU, but it's a voice in Europe. And so congratulations to Councillor Boyce on that. We have 3 civic events a year where councillors will parade in what is called in state, and that is with your gowns. We've already had 2 for this year, which were obviously a depleted inauguration because of COVID. We had the Battle of Britain in September, and the next time that council will march in state will be Remembrance Sunday on the 14th of November. I know and understand the reasons why some councillors may or may not be able to attend that. I really do. But could I just urge all members, it's an opportunity for you to dress up, march in state with your gowns, and also it's not about us at the end of the day and how we feel about particular issues. It's about the people that we represent and the people that we serve. So if we don't, for whatever reason, like to commemorate battles of Britain or whatever, that's fine. I totally respect that. I totally get that. But it's not about us. We're elected as representatives of the people, and it is important that we have as many councillors on that day as we can, please, because people do notice and they do comment. And that is all I will say on that matter. I will now hand over to the Leader of the Council for Communications from Rowena. Good afternoon, Rowena.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. It obviously had signed itself off, or I'd switched it off somehow. So, Cheltenham Borough Homes have recently submitted a planning application for Cheltenham's first carbon neutral council houses, and the application for at 320 Swindon Road is for 24 properties that will be extremely energy efficient. They'll be powered by air source heat pumps rather than gas boilers, and also produce energy by using solar panels. It's a really good news story, I think, in terms of this council and this council's investment of 180 million in homes, and also because of our climate emergency declaration, because that empowers Cheltenham Borough Homes to make a big difference in terms of that their contribution to that. And on a similar note, we're bidding for funding to upgrade some of the least energy efficient council houses. If we are successful, between 50 and 60 homes will be made more energy efficient, and we'll also be using the scheme to test the impact of using heat pumps in older properties. So therefore ensuring we can use this type of technology without putting any social housing tenants at risk of fuel poverty. With the climate change emergency in mind, Cheltenham's committed to minimising the use of weed killer on our streets. The chemicals in weed killers can often be harmful for insects, which has a knock-on impact on other larger animals and ultimately humans too. So having decided to cut down from 2 town-wide sprays to 1, we're now trialling alternative approaches to weed control, such as the use of rippers, which are rotary pavement sweepers equipped with wire arms to tear out the weeds. The Borough Council's Connecting Cheltenham reports sets out an ambitious, has ambitions for not just people-friendly streets and cycle paths, but much more besides. It's positive to see that the County Council are making strides with the cycle infrastructure, some of it which is in line with our aims. And I'm pleased to say that a key part of this is starting to come together with the long-awaited extension of the Honeybourne line. Last week, the UK's Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities visited Cheltenham, and we had the opportunity to share our ambitions for the Golden Valley. We also visited the Gloucestershire College to see that the £3 million Build Back Better investment that had been made there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Item number 6, to receive petitions. I'm not aware that we have any petitions to receive. That was a nice, easy item, so thank you. We'll move on to public questions. Is Tess Beck present? If you are, can you just wave your hand? Can't see. No? Okay, not present. There was an answer from the Cabinet member, which has been produced for everybody, I believe. And obviously there'll be no supplementary question. If I can move on to the next one, which is from Andrew Cater. Is Andrew Cater here today? No, and that's had a reply and will be published with the minutes for all to see. So if I then move on to Mr. Cater again, who's still not here. So we will, again, there's a reply to his question. That will be published in the minutes. That is the end of public questions. Thank you for the members of the public for tuning in to watch this. a global audience of about 5, but you understand why we're having this in this sort of position, which is for obviously COVID reasons. Member questions, agenda item number 8. I have the first one from the leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Tim Harman. You've had a response, Tim, from the Cabinet member. Do you have a follow-up question to that? You can sit down, Tim. It's all right. You don't have to stand here.
I'll stay seated, thank you. Now, I thank the Cabinet member for his actually very helpful reply, and I'm pleased that he is responding to the situation. Christmas will soon be upon us, and undoubtedly Father Christmas will bring a lot more packaging with him when he comes. This tends to be a problem every year, particularly for the cardboard packaging. Could he assure me that every attempt will be made to collect as much as possible and possibly put in additional collections if necessary over the Christmas and New Year period?
I thank Councillor Harman for that supplementary question. I can assure you that we will be doing everything we can to cope with cardboard over that period, and we will look into the issue of whether we can have supplementary collections as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Question from Councillor Flo Lucas to Councillor Martin Horwood. And you have an answer. Do you have a supplementary to the answer, Councillor Lucas?
And there's likely to be some significant issues following on from that as the crash concerned the railway bridge. And I wonder if we could actually add on to this the traffic flow down Hyde Lane to ensure that we don't actually have huge queues there should the bridge require rebuilding or significant restoration, because certainly the pictures that Councillor Fisher and I have seen look pretty awful in relation to the huge lorry that hit the top and the sides of that bridge. So I wonder if you would be kind enough to include that, please.
Councillor Horwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I just take this opportunity, since this is the first moment when I've spoken, to also pay my respects to David Amos, who, of course, I served with as an MP for 10 years. We disagreed on quite a lot of things, from Brexit to equal marriage. But he was endlessly polite and friendly. He was one of those people who just always smiled and treated you like a long-lost friend, even when there was, political disagreement, and we need more people like that in British politics. I'm sorry also to hear about the accident on Hyde Lane. That doesn't sound very nice at all, and I'm sure that the latest developments could be incorporated into the letter that Cabinet sends to Gloucestershire County Council.
Thank you, Councillor Horwood. I think your sentiments are well made, because the family of the late Sir David have actually asked for love and happiness in politics. I think that's a very noble sentiment, and you've just articulated that in what you've just said about the individual, so thank you for that. Councillor Fifield in the cheap seats. Good afternoon, Stephen. You've had a question to Councillor Victoria Atherstone. You have a reply. Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Fifield? Looks like you do.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the Cabinet member for the response. It's really great that there's a timeline for the reintroduction of the waters. It's fantastic news. Thank you for taking the time to also make sure that it's actually going to be properly checked to make sure that it is actually safe to take. I think the only thing I'd say in addition is that just to make sure that the actual quality of the water, not just that it's drinkable, but actually the quality of the water is also a consideration of what the Trust's doing, because I think there is a concern that the quality of water has effectively just become tap water, and that the actual additional health of the original sort of replication of the spa taste of the water has disappeared over time, and that just should be considered as part of the Trust strategy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Fifield. I agree that quality in terms of the taste of the water is important. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to probably, pop to another spa town to taste what that quality tastes like. But absolutely, please do come with me on a visit to the pump room in January, and we can decide between ourselves whether we think the quality is good enough. Thank you for your question.
Oh, you walked straight into that one. Have you not tried it? Yes. Not recently. I can assure you that if it was tap water, you'd know it was tap water. having tried it over many, many years in this borough. So I would suggest that Councillor Atherson lets you try it first, Councillor Fifield. And then she'll be able to tell from your gnarly face and disgusted look exactly how it tastes, and then she can defer and just go to the cafe. Right, I have a question from Sorry, a bit of levity there. It's Councillor Mason to Cabinet Member Pete Jeffreys. There has been a response. Councillor Mason, do you have a follow-up?
The Cabinet Member, and I have no follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Up to the cheap seats, I have a question from Councillor Nelson to the Cabinet Member Peter Jeffreys. That has been responded to. Councillor Nelson, did you have a supplementary question? Okay, far away.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to the Cabinet Member for his response. When you say the sale of the horse and groom is continuing, do you currently have an interested party? And if so, what is your timeline for completion? And regarding the rental properties that I know you're making steps to rent out again, what sort of rent-free periods, if any, are you offering as a carrot to new tenants coming in? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Jeffreys?
Thank you, Councillor Nelson, for your follow-up, your question and your follow-up question. With regards to the properties that are for sale, there are ongoing negotiations, but I know that one is quite close to completing. I could, without checking with officers for specific detail, I couldn't obviously give you that here and now, unfortunately. Equally with rent-free periods, that will be an ongoing conversation that officers have with any potential tenants. I'm not sure we offer it as a whole package. That would depend on each property. So I'm happy to take that away and find some more information out if you're agreeable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. And it's refreshing, Councillor Nelson. You've read the agenda. You know you're up next, so you get the microphone, and we don't have to get it back to you. So you've had your response from Councillor Horwood, the Cabinet Member. Do you wish to have a supplementary question to the Councillor?
Well, I've kept the microphone, so yes, please, Mr Mayor. Thank you to the Cabinet Member, Cabinet Member Horwood, for his response. And I, for one, will certainly welcome any benefits vis-à-vis clarity of process that the new digital platform being developed will bring. Meanwhile, I appreciate that detailed planning procedure may well be available. However, I do not believe they are readily accessible or in a user-friendly format. I raised this matter, as I said in my initial question, purely to try to set out the process in simple terms for the public. So, is an application only presented to committee if called in by the local member, or can the planning officer, initially with delegated decision authority, as a result of their detailed examination of the plans and after taking account of comments and objections from statutory consultees, put it to committee? And I should appreciate an answer, please, to my initial question on whether the officer attaches different weighting to responses from the various statutory consultees. For example, what weighting is given to objections or comments from the Parish Council or GCC Highways? Thank you.
Snuck in an extra one there. Councillor Horwood.
There were quite a few technical questions in there, but if I can take three elements I detected in there, and she can correct me if I miss one. Just on the transparency, I think she's exactly right, and I think we're in complete agreement that when you go onto the planning portal at the moment, the existing software platform has various deadlines which don't actually appear to be absolute deadlines. You can still comment after that, and members of the public are sometimes confused by that. None of them represent the 21-day call-in deadline, which in turn confuses some councillors. So there is room for a clearer and more transparent presentation of it online, and that is exactly what we are aiming to do with the new digital platform. Now, this is a project that's in progress and will take some time, so I wouldn't want to mislead her that this is going to happen overnight, or even in the next couple of months probably, but it is something we are determined to do and to make the process a lot clearer when you go onto the planning portal. She asked about the precise criteria for an application coming to committee. I would expect very major applications, and I'm thinking on the scale of the West Cheltenham development or something of that order, to go to planning committee without the need for call-in. I may have to consult with officers to give her the precise legal and constitutional criteria under our own constitution for what requires call-in. But in general, most planning applications require call-in by a councillor in order to go before committee. And her final question, remind me.
The weighting given to objections
That's
or
right.
comments from statutory consultees, which was in the original question I submitted. Please, thank you.
Yes, I have to be quite careful myself on answering this, but all officers have to reach a balanced judgment based on planning law and on planning policies. And so they should give weight, obviously, to the views of the parish council along with other statutory consultees, and in my experience they do. But it doesn't outweigh the need to reach a balanced judgment in all cases. Again, I may write to her with a more technically precise answer to those technical questions informed by officers' expertise.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Member. Please don't make it too technical.
I'll try.
Okay, agenda item 9. I would now like to invite Managing Director for Place and Growth, Tim Atkins, to lead on this item, please. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you, Matt. So in June, Tewkesbury Borough Council gave us a notice that they were going to terminate the agreement that we have in place for the provision of a monitoring officer, which has existed for a long time. So that obviously got us into a position that we needed to take steps to appoint a new monitoring officer. A review was undertaken and a paper taken to Appointments and Remuneration Committee in September. At that meeting, it was agreed that an interim would be appointed, so we'd go out and do a recruitment process, and it was also, they considered some options for the future and the desire to appoint a permanent monitoring officer. Consideration given the options there, of which we really looked at ideas around sharing with another authority, because we felt it wasn't probably a requirement for a full-time post, but it certainly was something that we wanted to have control over. So it was agreed that that would be linked in these next steps with the organisational review, and a subcommittee has been set up to drive that forward. A panel was established to go out and interview a short list of people for the interim role, and the panel unanimously agreed to make an appointment of Howard Norris to become the interim monitoring officer for this council for a period of 6 months. So our recommendation is set out in the report that we appoint with immediate effect, and I would mention that Howard has just left the room because he is here, to appoint him as the monitoring officer for an interim period with immediate effect. And the second recommendation is that to note the steps that will be taken to move forward by the panel, the subcommittee, to appoint a permanent monitoring officer, and obviously that appointment would come back to full council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Tim. Does anybody have any questions on the report before you, which I'm sure you've all read? It's always nice to see. In that case, we'll move on to the debate. Does anybody wish to speak? Looks like Mr. Atkins has gotten off lightly here, in some respects.
Just briefly. Well, I thought somebody ought to say something. Councillor Hay and myself, with the Chief Executive, took part in the interviews over a few days. I think it was a strong field of candidates, definitely, and I think we've got a very good person with great experience and a really good personality, which is what we want. And I have no hesitation in supporting the recommendations.
Thank you, Tim. You're the closest to me, but I still didn't see you indicating. Sorry, apologies. Very polite of you to wait. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Okay, is there anything that you, Tim, would like to add to the discussion?
No, I think we've just covered all the points. Be happy to go to the recommendation and vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, colleagues. We now have to vote to invite Mr Norris to join us up at the table up here. So could I have a show of hands, please? All of those that are in approval of the recommendation as given in the report. I would say that was unanimous. Thank you, Council. Mr Norris is around somewhere. Yeah, he's probably gone for a cup of tea. Don't blame him. But we'll wait, if you don't mind, we'll wait till Mr Norris joins us. Howard, congratulations. The Council have unanimously agreed that we like the cut of your jib and that you should be our monitoring officer. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sure Sarah Freckleton's already warned you that I'm one of the troublemakers. So I'm trying to get it on your good side straight away.
That's a relief, Mr. Mayor. I won't have to get on a train and go straight back to Cheshire.
Yeah, that was part of our consideration. We talked at length about whether you should be on the train or not, and whether we can give you a first class or second class ticket. But we've decided that you can hang around for the time being. So thank you and welcome to your new role. Okay, Mr Norris is in place. He's got his laptop ready. So I better start minding my P&Qs from now on. Agenda item 10, the interim review of polling stations, polling places and polling districts. I wonder if I could ask our electoral registration officer, Paul Jones, to introduce this report, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. So I think it's fair to reflect that the elections held in May 2021 were a once-in-a-generation event. The combination of 4 elections generated almost 118,000 ballot papers for verification and counting, notwithstanding the complications posed by the global pandemic. As a consequence of this latter point, some of the venues were not available for health and safety reasons, whilst due to the significant disruption already encountered to children's education, some schools requested we look for alternative venues. As the acting returning officer for the parliamentary constituency of Cheltenham, I have taken on board the above and formally requested a review to comply with our statutory duty. As part of this review, I've made formal commentary both into existing polling stations and those that may have been used in the future, and those are detailed in Appendix B. Following the closing date for the review, I have considered correspondence received as detailed in Section 2 of the report. Those comments received have been factored into the final determinations as set out in the recommendation. It's on page 1 of the report. So I'm happy to take any questions at this stage, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Does any member have any questions on the report at this stage? Crikey. Okay. No questions for you to respond to, Paul. Move into the debate. Does anybody wish to add anything at this point? Looks like the leader of the council would like to speak, followed by Councillor Collins.
We've all gone out of the habit of pressing buttons, haven't we? I just wanted to say that I really, thank you for doing that review in the first place. It was really important to do, and I think perhaps actually some of our residents may benefit from the changes that have been made. That's all I wanted to say, Mayor. Is thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hay. Does any other member have anything to add? Oh, Councillor Collins, sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I hope you didn't forget me then. But this is actually probably a question to Paul, and I'm sorry I wasn't quick enough off the mark to get my hand up to attract your attention. During the lead up to May's exciting elections, there was an issue with in Paverley with Lakeside School, and the polling station that was used as a replacement for the school was the nearby church. I understand that that church is actually not in the polling district. Could you just explain how we've managed to overcome that? Because obviously it's only a minor detail, but I would just be interested. Thank you.
Absolutely. So in terms of Lakeside School, that was obviously one of the schools that did request a formal alternative venue because of the significant disruption to the education. And for those that know that ward, historically we've used a porter cabin, and we had a few issues with fairly severe weather in what I think was December 2019 election, and therefore we, at the request, made alternatives to use the actual hall at Lakeside School. But because of safeguarding issues, and as I said, the issues surrounding the disruption to education, I thought, given the experiences that we encountered sort of 6 months ago, that we would look for an alternative. And yes, Councillor Collins, you are correct that the alternative venue that we sought was just outside of the actual ward in question. That's not an issue. We do have other wards where the most the best facility is slightly outside, and one of those we've actually corrected in this report by moving EB into the old Petitions squash courts. So having actually visited that new polling station on polling day, the vast majority of the feedback that I got was that it was a much better venue. Electors liked it, and in terms of the feedback, which I think did get quite a bit of sort of volume in terms of social media, a lot of the parents and voters had actually requested that as an alternative venue. So taking all that into account, I think it's the most suitable venue for that particular electorate.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder to colleagues in the chamber, you can press your buttons. I know it's been a while since you've been doing it. Press your buttons and you'll get yourself into the queue. It's the colleagues in the gallery that have to wave furious at me, which is why my attention's been up there, making sure that they're not misheard, and I'm missing the ones down here. But you down here have got the buttons. Please remember to use them. Thank you. Councillor Collins. Councillor Seacombe, thank you.
Ah, there we are. Good. I'm surprised this change from using schools hasn't come in a lot earlier, and by that I mean years earlier, because it's always a disruption. I've been in education for 45 years, and you know, I've never been in a school which has been disrupted by elections. However, I think this is a good move, which has been prompted by all sorts of reasons. The only people to lose out, as I see it, and are the children who were looking forward to having a day off school. But I know that's the wrong reason for carrying on with polling stations in schools. So it's a good move. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Seacombe. Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on from the leader's comments around thanking the officers for the beneficial changes this is going to have for residents, Paul Jones glossed over the fact that it's probably one of the biggest elections we had in the middle of a global pandemic. I just want to put on record my thanks to the officers of this council, the volunteers and all the staff involved, because it was extremely challenging. I know I've seen many elections in my tenure sat in this side of the chamber, so just on behalf of myself and other colleagues, thank you very much.
Completely echo that sentiment, Councillor Jeffreys. I'm glad someone said it out loud. Thank you. Anybody else in the chamber or up in the gallery wish to comment? I'd like... Yeah, it's just this moment popped into my screen. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice to be back in the chamber. But Councillor Collins' remark, it's quite interesting that, and Councillor Seacombe's remark, years ago most schools were in public ownership. They were council-owned buildings. They're not anymore. They're run by trusts, education trusts and things like that. But it is unusual to have it out of the area, but it does occur elsewhere in Cheltenham. St Nicholas's Church in Swindon Village, which is actually in Prestbury. The church itself is in Prestbury, but there's a polling station there for Prestbury and a separate one for Swindon Village come elections, that sort. But it's not creating a precedent.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I can see somebody waving up in the gallery. Is there a microphone for them? You're too dark. I can't see who you are. You have to tell me when you get the microphone.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The one comment I'd like to make, as regards moving polling stations away from schools, I actually think it's a sad move. One of the things I used to find, I mean, I've been involved in elections for years, and we always go on about the low turnouts and how sad it is. And when my children were growing up, the polling stations at Norton Park, I thought it was great that the children could actually see democracy going on when they were young, and I think it's a good way to introduce children to the process. So I regret it, I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oliver from Wardham Hill. Recognise there's Dorset turns anywhere. Any other member have anything to say on this before I ask Mr. Jones if he had anything to add? Then I finish it. No? Okay, over to you, Paul. Nothing to add. I would like to pass on my personal appreciation for the election this year. I've not been involved in an election that big ever, and I've been involved in Cheltenham since 1980. So to have a police and crime commissioner, a county and a borough at the same time was, and the way that it was managed is testament, I think, to the organisational strength of this borough, our officers, and you as the leader, as the electoral registrations officer, yeah. So thank you, Paul. Thank you to all of the team. I know you'll always deflect to the team because that's the way you are, but thank you so much for doing that. We need to move to a vote now, so can I have an indication, please? Everybody in favour of the recommendations as seen in the report? Thank you. That's passed. That is passed unanimously. I presume that's why Tim was coughing in my ear, not that he's got an actual frog in his throat. He thought I'd forgotten about the vote, but thank you for the prompt, Tim. Right. Agenda item 11, the safety of women at night. This follows the recent public consultation that the borough undertook, and I'm not going to spoil any of the feedback from Councillor Clucas, but if I could ask Councillor Flo Clucas, our Cabinet Member for Safety and Communities, to introduce this item, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not a report that requires a decision, colleagues. It is merely to update you on the situation as it exists now and how we are progressing that. One very important issue for councillors, something which we have already discussed with senior police officers, is whether each of you would like us to arrange a seminar so that you can ask your own questions of the police. Not so that you'd get answers through us, but so you can ask your own questions. And the police have agreed to do that, and I'm really pleased about that. So if colleagues here would wish to go down that route, then I'm perfectly content that we should arrange it. One of the things I would like to do, Mr. Mayor, is actually to thank our officers, because over the last 6 months or so, there's been a lot of work done in relation to this. Not just in looking at the survey, not just in talking to those most often involved in dealing with problems, but also how we can actually make things better. And the survey has pointed us in some directions, some of which I hope the funding, which I really do hope and pray we will receive, will help us to do, but others, should that funding not become available. Because one of the things that we are not going to do is ignore the voice of women, even if we can't get money from government to do the work that we wish to do. And so what we are looking at here is firstly our licensing policy and how we can incorporate into that licensing policy some requirements for those who get our licenses for pubs, clubs, bars, restaurants, events, and so on, to ensure that their staff actually understand what is going on. Not only understand it, but actually are prepared to take action to deal with it. So that, for example, if a youngster has their drink spiked, what might somebody behind the bar do to help them? This sort of thing, we believe, we could do really quite quickly and quite well, talking to our colleagues in licensing, and again, we've had a good deal of help from officers in relation to this, in order for us to be able to take that forward. The second thing we're going to look at doing is to ensure that our schools actually understand what is happening, because none of this happens when you're 30, or when you're 40, or when you're 50, or 60, or 70. This happens when you're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the interesting thing that came through from talking to many of the women is how often they're actually abused by kids, by 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. Now, ask yourself, how on earth can children like that know how to abuse somebody else? And the answer is simple. Social media. Because so many youngsters have access to it now that it has become a way of life, and they're picking things up from it. And so we hope that by working with our head teachers and teachers, working with those who actually are dealing with our children, we'll be able to counter some of that. I wouldn't say that we can counter all of it. I'm not Mr. Bezos. I'm not anybody who is big in social media. So I would anticipate that we will be able to do some of that with our teachers and hopefully our parents too, because they also need to be aware of what's going on with their children. In addition to that, we will be having a period of time where we will be looking at doing a lot of confrontation through our own conversation with the people of Cheltenham, so that they understand through the culture that we're going to help to establish that actually caterwauling somebody, shouting at them, trying to sexually assault them because you think it's funny, isn't funny. And so tackling that culture is going to be a main part of what we're seeking to do. And of course, with money that we hope the OPCC will make available, we will have more CCTV cameras, we will have an app on which you'll be able to report what you see and what you hear. And that app will be anonymous so that the person reporting it won't feel that they are endangered by so doing. And we will also, I sincerely hope, be able to have safe spaces for women in our town. And the reason I wanted to report back to you today, colleagues, is to say all of this is being done. And I hope we will be able to do more as time goes on. We will organise the seminar, as all of you appear to think that is a good idea, and we will begin the process of taking this forward with our schools, with our parents, with our businesses, with our licensing colleagues, and with our county council colleagues to try and ensure that the women of this town can walk around being unmolested, can walk around feeling safe, can walk around feeling this town belongs to them. And unfortunately, with 95% of the respondents to the survey saying that they had to change their behaviour because of activity in town and the way it was affecting them, that those 95% will feel safer again on our streets, in our bars, pubs, nightclubs, and so on. So thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I hope if you have any questions, you can ask them either today or you can ask them on email. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Does any member have any questions on the report? Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask Councillor Clucas, dependent on the result, if we are successful in getting the grant money, or if we're not, either way, would you be happy to present the outcomes and the result and also the plans within this report to the Culture Board, so that together we might be able to look at other solutions in tackling this in terms of education?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Atherton. The answer is yes.
Yep, we're going to the gallery. Councillor Brownstein. I'll just wait till the microphone gets to him. Councillor Brownstein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clucas. Welcome the report. It's important that we're doing this kind of work. Obviously, the results are shocking, and I think we need to have a conversation about that. 39% of respondents reported experiencing some form of sexual assault. It's a terribly high number, and the reason I wanted to speak is, for the past few years, I've been this council's representative to the Police and Crime Panel. I'm now the chair of that panel, and so I just wanted to check in, really, because the statistic here of 34% of respondents not talking about their experiences, not telling anyone about their experiences. The reason why that's prompted me to speak is that we know in this county there is an issue with the recording of crime. The constabulary was very poorly rated as inadequate 2 years ago for not recording crimes properly. So you got to. I wonder, whether or not victims are bothering to report because they don't expect anything to be done, or if that's a driver. My question really is, to what extent are you working directly with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner? The new Commissioner has a strong commitment to tackle antisocial behaviour, zero tolerance. Sorry, I've been working on net zero this morning for a water company. Zero tolerance towards antisocial behaviour. These are some of the Commissioner's key objectives, and communicating that this stuff is going on is absolutely vital to achieving those perspectives. So as part of our public communications drive in this, how much are we pushing, encouraging victims to come forward and speak? Because if they're not doing so, then we're going to have a whole load of crimes that go unreported, unrecorded, unchallenged, and that kind of undermines our ability to tackle this if we're not aware of the extent of the problem. So that's my kind of comment, really. And are you working with the Commissioner in helping him to achieve that goal?
Thank you, Councillor Brownstein. The situation is, yes, we are in full conversation with the police. The most senior police officer in the county dealing with this has been in meetings with us, and in addition to that, we are going to be working on the seminar so that you will actually get a full picture of all of the responses. Many of those responses we have not made public, but they will be made available to you, so that you will see both the level of reporting, actions by the police, how the public feel, and so on. All of that will be made available to you, and you will be in a position where you can ask questions about it of a senior police officer and the person who is dealing with this subject for the Police and Crime Commissioner, whose name escapes me, I beg your pardon. So that all is being done. The level of reporting was a big concern to us. And the reason why it's not being reported is because the women who have said they've not reported it don't think anything will happen. They can't see the point. And I think that is something that we really need to tackle, to face up, and to make change in. Because if you're not getting a full picture, you're not going to be able to respond properly. This is something that the superintendent is extremely keen on, and we will be talking to him again, both about the seminar and how we can respond to the sorts of issues that you have brought up.
Councillor Clucas, thank you. Does any other member have any questions? Yeah. Councillor Nelson in the gallery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to applaud and endorse all that Councillor Clucas has done. I think it's wonderful with the work she's doing, and obviously there aren't very many women in the chamber today, but by golly, we're lucky to have you championing our cause. Just from the statistic side of things, and Councillor Clucas mentioned the county money that's come through from the Safer Streets initiative, 517,000 to be allocated across the county. Just to say that Cheltenham is only second to Gloucester in the total crime statistics. Gloucester account for 40% of the county crime. Cheltenham is considered the next in line between 20 and 30, with several crime hotspots even in wonderful Cheltenham. So they should be a deserving recipient of their fair share, and the specifics of the OPCC office at the moment are actually working on the allocation of that money as we speak. So I think we should get some funding towards CCTV, to the app, to make our spaces safe. And this is particularly good news because any funding we do get, be it 30% of that 500,000, must be spent by March 2022. And of course, that's nicely in line with the races, which, as we've seen from the results of your survey, is one of the key times when the behaviour perhaps deteriorates as a result of alcohol. Thank you. I just wanted to applaud you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And you actually picked up on a point that I'd noted in the report on page 53 and 54 of the disparity between the amount for the whole of the county and how much went to Cheltenham and how much goes to Gloucester. So thank you for raising that shortcoming. I didn't know whether Councillor Clucas knows why Cheltenham is getting put in with the rest of the county in the total of 517,000.
Yes, the issue is the amount of reporting that happens. So if you're not reporting, you ain't going to get the money. It's as simple as that. But actually, there are two other issues here. The first is we have also bid for funding on the Safer Streets government grant, and we will find out about that mid-November, as far as I understand it. That bid has also incorporated the survey that we've done. However, I do want to say that even without that money, we are going to try and change the culture of this town to make it unacceptable for people to behave in the way that they do. Because if they carry on like this, then we are going to be faced with people potentially not surviving. And I say that in the greatest of goodwill, but that is what we may well look at. It only takes one. And if you think that since Sarah Everard was murdered, 81 women have been murdered in this country. 81 in 28 weeks. There's a stark lesson there about why it is important that we tackle this as root cause.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Jeffries, I just wanted to add that last week, of course, was National Hate Awareness Week, which this council supported the initiative very strongly. I myself and 2 advisors spoke to camera. Hate crime is offensive, and it is an offence. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Clucas, if people don't report it, not necessarily to 999, if it's not a dire emergency and it's not death, then report it to 101. I say this quite a lot as a ward councillor to my residents, because their attitude sometimes is, well, the police don't know anything about it. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us as members to manage our own residents and say, you have to report it. Because if it's reported, it then gets prioritised. So this is actually a stark reminder that if it's not reported, then we lose out, because the money will go where the problems are being reported. So thank you for highlighting that. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clucas. As other colleagues have said, this is an important issue, an important topic. But you touched on a couple of things actually, which made me want to speak. You mentioned the use of social media, and for those of us who are young enough to remember the birth of video games, clearly there was quite a lot of evidence, maybe or suggestion to prove that video games had a negative impact on young people. But it sort of worries me. I've got to this age in life as a husband and a father, and the women in my life are not safe in the streets in the town that I live. And that worries me. And I applaud you for your efforts, and I support you 100%, as I'm sure colleagues across this council will. But we need to go further than this. It's endemic in our society, whereas the women and the way they're treated. And I think it's so shamefully wrong. I've got 3 daughters, and they're going to grow up as empowered young women, but have to change their behaviour at some point because of the way men treat women. So whilst I welcome bidding into central government pots of funding, I would implore my colleagues opposite that have power and influence with the government to do what they can to enable that sort of change at governmental level. Because pots of funding and to do specific pieces of work is good, but ultimately change across the board needs to happen from us locally and what we can do. And I know you will do what you can, but right up through government. So I welcome the report and the efforts you're going to, and I'm grateful, so thank you.
Yep, please, yep.
Right, just to say, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This isn't something that we can change ourselves, but one of the reasons why we are going to be working in education is to begin that process, because you don't change people at the age of 25, 35, 45. You change them at the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's where the difference is made in our schools, and that's why we're going to be doing that. In addition, the other thing I wanted to mention is we're hosting Take Back the Streets in Cheltenham in November. 25th, 26th, we will be here in November doing that, and I'm sure, Mr Mayor, you'll be actively involved in that. And I would urge people, if you can, to take part in that or to support it by putting it on your, here we go, social media pages. But you're right, I mean, social media, I think, has a lot to answer for, and I think governments across the world really need to look at this seriously, not to damage free speech, but actually to make people safe.
Councillor Clucas, thank you. We slipped slightly into debate there. Because this is a really important topic, I didn't want to get all pedantic. So, do members, for now, if you could just restrain it to questions to the Cabinet Member. I've got Councillor Willingham first, Councillor Harman. He is I cancelled him. It's the power of this seat. I didn't realise I could do it, but I've done it. But if Councillor Willingham might speak before, if you don't mind. Councillor Willingham, have you got a question for the Cabinet Member?
Move into debate. I'd assumed we'd moved into debate. So are you happy for me to carry on?
Can we just check whether Councillor Harman has a question, or whether he... Yeah, okay. So the suggestion's been made, and I'm happy to go along with it, that we move from the questions to the Cabinet Member into the debate. So, Councillor Willingham, you had indicated first, so if you'd like to start us off, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many people have said, this is an important report, and as the evening and nighttime economy champion, I fully support the work. I think I would like to add my thanks to the officers who have done a lot of work behind the scenes, putting in our bid, and also for the work that they do in enforcement to try and keep the nighttime economy safe. I will get onto that in a moment. Through the licensing committee, I am more than happy to support this work. It is important. Personally, I don't have the lived experience to feel fully qualified to speak on this. I don't have to walk home at night carrying keys, as I know some of my colleagues do. I don't have to take a different route because I feel afraid that I can't walk down through particular parts of town. But, and those are things told to me by female friends, colleagues, and what have you. But I do know from being out with our licensing enforcement team during race week what the alcohol-fuelled atmosphere of the town is like during race week, and I fully understand why women, and in fact some men, quite a lot of people, feel unsafe at that point. I think one of the things that the council needs to do is to look slightly wider at some of our other policies as well. So it's things like designing out crime during the planning process. Those buildings will be around for 50, 100 years potentially. If they are poorly designed and they facilitate crime, whether it's by having alcoves or poor design, then we're going to be left with that problem for a long time. We also need to think about the maintenance of our green spaces, raising the canopy so that there are fewer hiding places. We also need to look beyond our town centre, which is covered quite widely by CCTV. There is an important aspect of making sure that there is joined up reporting of safeguarding concerns. If someone is known to present a risk and that information comes to one authority's knowledge, then that information may well need to be shared. And nobody should be hiding behind the Data Protection Act for not sharing that information. Public safety is a reason for doing that. When this bid was mentioned on the council's newsfeed, there were some social media comments from men asking why this was only aimed at women. Now, this is probably typical divisive social media trolling. But there is a simple response. The work being done to make the evening and nighttime economy safer for women will actually make it safer for everyone. But there is a reason why we target, why women are more vulnerable and why we need to change the behaviour of men. Not everyone will know about this, but we have a night safe scheme. Most of the late night venues have a radio which keeps them in touch with the police and with other licensed premises in the nighttime economy. And it runs an exclusion scheme which keeps people who are engaged in violent conduct and drug dealing and various other serious offences out of our nighttime economy. And I asked the officers this afternoon, for some information about this. And the response that I had is there are currently 14, so 14 persons excluded from all of our venues under this scheme, all of whom are male, which I think evidences that there is a problem that we need to tackle. So I am more than happy to support this now and through licensing going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor William. I've now got Councillor Harman for Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope this is something we can all support, and it would be really good to get a wholehearted, unanimous vote. I see no reason why not. I just want to make a couple of points. Councillor Clucas, who I also commend for her work on this, mentioned the effects of social media. Increasingly, every day, I see this as a real threat. I'm afraid it is. Something being terribly misused. It seems to me it's hitting people's mental health, it's damaging our young children, it's encouraging people to commit suicide. And, you know, to add my comments about Sir David Amess, we know so many members of Parliament are harassed through social media, receive threats. I'm sure Councillor Holwood is as aware of this as any of us. Totally wrong. So I'm afraid I do think a lot of action has to be taken internationally, because it's not just a national thing, on social media. And I really think that it's almost becoming the curse of the age, I have to say that. The second point I'd make about the women in our town, and we don't like to think of anybody being threatened. What brought it home to me a few weeks ago, I don't go out much late at night these days. I'm afraid my clubbing days are behind me. I'm sure I'd find Councillor Clucas in there if I did, but whatever. After lockdown, we went out to some friends, you know, female friends, not very young, but a few years younger than me. And at the end of the night, they said, this is only it was only 11:30, can I walk them home? And I said, it's not very far. And she said, no, I want you to walk me home. And all the time, even with me walking me home, they weren't naming me, keys were like that in the fingers, because that's how they walk through town. Another friend who works in the hospitality industry has to walk to her flat, often at 2 or 3 in the morning. She has a rota with male colleagues that walk her, and they always make sure that happens. That shouldn't have to happen, should it? So you have my support and the support of the Conservative group.
Thank you, Councillor Harman. I'll just add to your comment about MPs getting hate mail and harassment on social media. Councillors in this chamber get that as well. Councillors in other chambers get it as well. So we're right to point out the national level of harassment and threats, but there are colleagues in here, current colleagues in here, that are even now subjected to comments that are better kept in that individual's head or whatever. So, Councillor Atherstone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to also put my thanks to Councillor Clucas for bringing this report to us today. And actually, I was sent an email very recently from a resident of Cheltenham inquiring about putting additional lighting through a park in Cheltenham. And it made me think, crikey, like walking through a park at night, that's brave. And then it dawned on me that that's something I would never dream of doing. And the same when it comes to alleyways or to streets that don't have property facing them. There are so many times throughout my entire life that, you know, I have certainly preferred not to go out at night, ensure that I get a taxi, drive instead of walking or cycling, definitely avoiding certain routes. And I think that I'm so pleased this is being discussed right now, because it's not right, like you say, Councillor Harman, and I too walk around with keys if I have to, as protection. And you know, as a younger person, when I was studying in London, I used to have a mobile phone when they were sort of first, you know, small enough to walk around with. And then I was told that I had to stop using my mobile phone because I had 999 ready when I was walking back from pubs. Because suddenly I was a target for having a mobile phone in my hand. So it was a lose-lose. And I'm really pleased that we're going to benefit from the county council's money because this app is going to be really, really great in people actually saying, no, do report it. Do let us know if you feel like someone's jumped out of you from a bush or something like that. You know, whatever it might be, if you feel threatened, report it. And actually, I'd really like to sort of echo what Councillor Willingham has said with regards to this being taken at also a much more higher level. Because why are we building neighbourhoods that are not considering safety, whether that's for men or for women? Why do we have parks that are not lit? You know, so can we please also work with the county council in terms of, you know, lighting of streets, and also to look at sort of planning policies locally, and also to recommend, you know, nationally, that we look at designing safer streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atherton. Does any other member have anything they wanted to add to the debate? One of the things I would like to add from the Chair, actually, is we are an award-winning council for our nighttime economy, and there are things that are there, but we are not complacent. And we do live in the real world, and that's why this survey was undertaken, to see whether there's anything else we need to do that people haven't hitherto let us be aware of. So I think it's vital that we have a survey like this, and the work that was undertaken should be commended, because we're not complacent in this town. We know that we do not live in a perfect world, much as we might aspire to it. So I think it's important that we air these issues, and we hear the progress that's being made. But as councillors have already said, and as I think we know in life, you cannot change the habits of somebody that's in their 20s or 30s. It's got to be starting at home. Misogyny has got to be a word of the past, and that'll start with how that is dealt with in families. It is, you know, a father of 2 daughters, and it worries me that other fathers might be giving other advice and saying other things to their sons. So it's important that we don't try and gloss over any of the imperfections in our borough, but I think we are generally quite a safe place, but that doesn't mean that we should close our ears and close our eyes to anybody that does have concerns. And again, as we've already touched on, report it, please. Report it. If you really think that there's an issue, and I'm saying this to the YouTube audience, report it 101. Report it to the Borough Council. And that way we can increase the funding, and we can concentrate on areas like Councillor Atherton's mentioned, some parks that are dark at night. So, so does anybody else have anything else to say? And if not, there are 2 recommendations about, which are just to note, but there is a vote required because we need to send this to Cabinet. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. So is everybody in favour of us sending this report to Cabinet? Show your hands, please. Thank you. Not surprisingly, that is overwhelmingly endorsed, so thank you so much for that. Right. Agenda item number 12, the annual report of overview and scrutiny. And I'd still like to say, this is how this should be done. Councillor Mason is sitting on this side of the chamber. He's not sitting on this side of the chamber. This is how oversight and scrutiny should be done by a leader from the opposition party to the council in power. And I would like to welcome Councillor Mason to present his annual report to the council, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. You've stolen one of my lines. You've all read the report, and just look at the breadth of things we've looked at. I'm not going to name them all, but we've looked at the economy, we've looked at finance, we've looked at social community, and I think that's a testament to this council. I would like to thank members that were on that and have now moved on to pastures new. They've become cabinet members, and we welcome new members to the committee. And I think I would also like to put my thanks for Democratic Services. They have got me out of my numpty situations more than once on this. The point I really wanted to make is that since I've been chair of this, with the help of John, Alex, Martin, Clara, what we have done is try to change the emphasis on it. When I first became chair, we always looked at something that had happened, the overview side of it. Now we're sort of trying to get the scrutiny side of it, and an example would be the Director of Planning came along and gave us a presentation about what it is we want to do within the town centre. But this is an opportunity where the committee members can now challenge that that officer or cabinet members, so we can have some input as the policies are being developed, and then obviously once they've been done, then it comes back. But that's the overview side of it. So I know we do a pretty good job at overview and scrutiny. We do ask some challenging questions, and I think we're far more businesslike than we used to be. So yeah, that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Does any member have any questions for the chair of ONS? None that I can see. So we can move this into the debate if you like. Anybody want to say anything further about the annual report? Oops, beg pardon. The leader, Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say thank you to those members that serve on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and in particular to Councillor Mason. When I first started as a councillor, those Overview and Scrutiny meetings were actually very adversarial, and that never gets the best out of anybody when it's like that. You know, it's holding people to account, absolutely, and us participating, but it isn't a war. It's actually about people doing their job in order to actually deliver things better, if possible, for our residents in Cheltenham. So I really welcome the changes that have happened over the last few years there, and you know, I used to go when I was a cabinet member where it was relevant to me, and obviously now I go in general as leader to that. So my thanks to Councillor Mason and all of those who sit on the scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Is there any other? Councillor Stafford. Hello, Joe. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I just really want to say, as a member of the committee, I returned to the committee based on the fact that actually Councillor Mason's chairing is so good, that committee. It seems a bit, you know, just a bit to say about him, but he actually makes the committee very pleasant and run very well, and we do have some excellent reports, but actually he's an excellent chair for that, so thank you.
I just thought I ought to echo that. Yes, it is a pleasant committee to be on at the moment, and thank you very much, Councillor Mason, for all and for the others too that put so much work into the preparation, you know, for the meetings, etc. We get some very good presentations now, and we have the opportunity beforehand to look at them and come up with our questions, which is always helpful. So. Yes, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Addison.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to thank Councillor Mason from the receiving end. You know, I really appreciate the way it's so professionally and diplomatically sort of managed. Excellent questions. You're absolutely right that it's important to be scrutinised at the early stages so that we are accountable for our actions. And yeah, I'd just like to thank you and the team for the great job that you guys do.
Any other member before I put this to bed and have a vote? What I've heard over many years in this council chamber is councillors on the side to my right saying that they are there to provide constructive criticism of the council and the administration in power, and that is absolutely right. And I think one of the things that I've noted and I've appreciated as a member out there and as chair is the way in which the scrutiny of our members of the Cabinet is done. It is with respect. We've not had a group meeting to talk about this, Councillor Mason, and unsolicited, you've received endorsement and congratulations for your chairing of the committee. I know you're embarrassed by me saying that, but you don't need to be embarrassed. I think it's the spirit in which councillors in this chamber conduct their business, led by Councillor Harman and predecessors, that is good. It is good. And I think developing policies, I think my understanding from the administration is they're not closed to ideas. So developing policies with what they want to do is what they would like to encourage. Because the one thing that we really want to have to show to people outside of this chamber is that there are 40 councillors that think as one. We are looking after the interests of our constituents, our neighbours, our friends and the people of Cheltenham. And there is a lot of nonsense that takes place outside of this chamber on social media. And I know councillors on Tim's team will know that I've made representation about this in the past, and I remember once, a couple of years ago, Diggory came up to me and said, "It's not me, Steve, not me. I'm not on social media." What is social media? So we had a quick yes, you remember that conversation, don't you? So in here, it makes the job of the mayor, the chairman of the committee, a lot easier, that there's no rancour going across, and we all care about our town, and we all care about how our conduct. We should be sending a very strong message to the people outside about how we conduct ourselves, and I think we do. It's just sad that the global audience on YouTube is probably about 5 or 6, but at least it's minuted that we have these open discussions and we have these reports, and we sometimes air warts and all. But as I said at the beginning, and I'm sorry, Chris, to take your line, but I do really appreciate that as a former school governor, I'm sure we've all been school governors, critical friend. That's what oversight and scrutiny should be, a critical friend, because we have the one thing in common. So we are asked to note the report. I'd like to thank all the officers and councillors for the last year in doing what they've done. I like the style that it's moved to. I think that works, and I think the chairman has heard quite clearly that it works for members as well. So keep asking the tough questions. You won't always get the answers you want, I'm sure, but that's at least it's been asked in a nice way and answered, I hope, in a nice way. So can I just have a show of hands, please, if everybody is happy with the annual report from the Chair of Oversight and Scrutiny? Thank you. That again is unanimous. I didn't mention this at the beginning because I didn't want to, but I was receiving some medical intervention this morning, and I'm not feeling great. So I wonder if I might retire for 5 or 10 minutes to take some pain relief. I know it's a little bit before we would normally have a break, but I've got water and I've got my Tic Tacs, but they're not pain relief. So I wonder if we could adjourn for 10 to 15 minutes. Is that okay with council if we did that? That's very kind of you. Thank you. asked us to come back in. And we are quorate, so we will carry on. So, agenda item 13, motions. And I would like to invite Councillor Horwood, who does know the Constitution, who's in his place. Is that how they say it in Parliament, Martin? I don't know, but you're there, thank you. So if I could ask you to propose the motion and speak to it for no more than 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I hope not to use the entire 10 minutes. Green space is good for all of us. It has obvious benefits for physical exercise. There is now copious evidence that it's incredibly beneficial to mental health as well. It provides space for tranquility, often for dark skies, helping to connect people to nature, including young people who, in my experience, spend a bit too much time in front of screens of various kinds at the moment. I'm sure if my son is watching, he would disagree. They also provide free recreation and exercise spaces, and thereby reduce health inequalities as well, and so they're particularly valuable in those least well-off urban areas. And they provide what is known in the jargon as ecosystem services, particularly when they include trees and hedgerows. They absorb particulate pollution, improving air quality. They absorb carbon dioxide, helping us to combat climate change. And they, of course, provide for a variety of habitats for a number of different species, even in urban areas, helping us to combat the biodiversity crisis, which many scientists think is as serious as climate change. And they provide space for simple enjoyment, which is a much underrated value these days. It's almost as if something in our DNA just programs us to feel better, to feel more relaxed, to feel more at home in a green space. But until the coalition government took an obscure Liberal Democrat policy and put it into the National Planning Policy Framework, there was no designation that communities could routinely use to simply protect green spaces that they valued for all these diverse reasons. You had to go and find a landscape painter who could say that it was outstandingly beautiful and thereby get some kind of special designation on landscape grounds. Or you had to find some great crested newts and put those in and try and use one of the protections that existed for extremely rare species. Or you had to delve into medieval common law and try and declare it a village green or something like that. And all the time you were accused of NIMBYism for even sort of daring to suggest that green spaces were valuable in themselves and should be protected. Now, I'm very proud on 4 levels that we now have 16 of these local green space designations across Cheltenham. On the first, I'm proud to have played my own small part in writing the original policy. Secondly, I'm proud that a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, and let's take forward this spirit of cross-party camaraderie into this debate, that a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition put into practice in the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework a policy which is now being used by councils of all colours and all stripes across the country to protect green spaces valued by communities. Dates us back to a bygone era of cooperative politics, but maybe we can try and rekindle some of that cooperative spirit. Thirdly, I'm proud that this council has made full use of that policy. Not all councils have. And not just in the leafier suburbs like Leckhampton and Charlton Kings, where I guess you could have expected it to be used, but in Hester's Way, in Heatherley, in Linworth, in St Mark's, in Fairview, in a whole variety of communities in this town, including many for whom urban green space is particularly vital and important. And finally, and importantly, I'm very proud that the confidence given by designating areas as local green space and giving them proper protection means that communities don't have to fight tooth and nail against every single planning application and development in their communities, because they have the confidence that actually talking cooperatively about where houses and new homes should go doesn't compromise the local green space that they have properly protected. So in both Leckhampton and Swindon Village, we have really spectacular examples of how local green spaces, quite substantial local green spaces, have been protected. but alongside the planning of hundreds and hundreds of new homes which are badly needed and are part of meeting our housing needs assessment under strategic plans and under the Cheltenham Plan. And it's at times seemed like an impossible circle to square, to have new homes and things like new schools, as we're having in Beckhampton and probably northwest of Cheltenham as well, but also to protect green space at the same time. But we have managed to square that circle in Cheltenham, and I'm very proud that we've done so. So why bring this motion forward today? Why? What's the special occasion? Apart from just celebrating the success of this policy and how great it is that we've got it in the local plan. Well, without getting politically contentious, there has been discussion of quite major change to the planning system in this country. There's been discussion of a much simpler, much less accountable, I believe much less democratic planning system, which I think would pose an existential threat to the kind of thoughtful and accountable system of planning that has led to the designation of all these 16 local green spaces. Now, in the spirit of cross-party cooperation, I should recognise that the government at the moment has retreated from proposing anything like that, and I think that was a wise and sensible decision by the government. But let's try and put on record, and that's why I'm suggesting that we contact the department, now called the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, which I'm resisting the temptation to call Lurch. But we are going to contact the department and urge local MPs as well to protect this local green space designation in planning policy going forward. It was an important achievement of the coalition government, both Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, and I think it should be protected and defended. And of course there are also, I'm afraid to say, developers who are still after a quick buck and still eyeing up some of the green spaces that have been designated, and given half a chance would seek the opportunity to undermine that designation even at very local level. And so this motion puts down a marker saying that at both neighbourhood level, at Cheltenham level, at joint core strategy level, at every level that's open to us, we are going to make a very clear declaration that the local green spaces are not up for grabs and we will defend them. And councillors, I would like you to send an unambiguous message and support this motion along those lines. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horwood. And I believe you have a seconder, Councillor Fisher. Do you wish to speak now or forever hold your, well, to reserve your right to speak later?
I'd like to reserve my right, please.
Okay, thank you. Does any member wish to speak to the item? You've got 5 minutes if you do. Councillor Babbage in the cheap seats, in the gallery.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a few points around this issue. One, I just want to make a clarification, though. You talk at one point about regarding LGS sites as having the same protection as AONB. I believe at the moment it's the same as Greenbelt rather than AONB. I just want to check whether that was whether that's something that should be changed or whether that was a deliberate thing to increase the level of protection we give to them. I guess the points I wanted to make more widely around this whole issue of local green space. I'm very supportive of the designation and the additional protection it gives, particularly around sort of the democracy side of it, the fact that local people can put these sites forward and we adopt them through the Cheltenham Plan and whatever subsequent plans there might be. I guess the points I wanted to raise around it is, it's not just the local green space sites that we need to be mindful of. There are a number of sites that weren't considered weren't considered suitable for local green space, for example, but I think many people in the chamber would agree still deserve protection of some sort. So I don't know if you have any particular thoughts in that area, but I know that I've got a few sites in mind that I think really do warrant additional protections, ones that weren't put forward for local green space last time, but have since been classified as local wildlife sites, key wildlife sites. And I know, I think I would again hope that many people in the chamber would hope that a local wildlife site, and we only have 6 of them in Cheltenham, should be a prime candidate for local green space. And I would love the council to look again at that site. The one I'm thinking of is Oakhurst Rise, or St Edward's Schoolfields, depending on how you look at it. The other issue I wanted to raise was around, and it's slightly wider, slightly wider than just local green space, but public green space. It's another designation. It wasn't considered as part of the Cheltenham plan, and I'd very much like to know, well, hopefully the council will be bringing forward plans to update our register of public green spaces as well, because I know there are a few parks in our area, in Battledown and around, that aren't actually protected at the moment, and it would be great to be able to get that public green space designation clarified and sorted out. So I don't know if there's any plans in place to actually take forward changes to that register as well. So sorry, forgive me for taking the issue a bit wider than the motion you've proposed, but yeah, broadly speaking, they're very supportive of what you put. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Babbage. Those are very good questions. On the first, the place where the various designations, including AONB and Greenbelt and sites of special scientific interest and the local green space designation are together, is in one famous footnote to the National Planning Policy Framework introductory statement of what constitutes sustainable development. So that's where they are grouped together. Each of them has slightly different rules and slightly different ways of being created and slightly different justifications and slightly different applications. But that's where they are grouped together, and that was the reference that I was making in the motion. Secondly, he talks about the other possible sites. There was originally, or there was at one stage in the development of the Cheltenham Plan, a very much longer list, which actually included a whole bunch of places, including Weaver's Field in Warden Hill, including Burrows Field in Leckhampton, which actually, when it came to examination, I think everybody agreed they didn't really need the protection of local green space status because they were already protected. Weaver's Field as a Queen Elizabeth, I can't quite remember the exact term, but it has its own special status. Burrows Field is a sports field and recognised as such, so didn't need protection in that way. So that longer list was pruned down because most of those other areas didn't need the protection, not because they were sort of ripe for development in anybody's eyes. But he's quite right. There may be other sites, and in fact I can think of a couple, which I'd probably better not mention off the top of my head, but I can think of a couple which perhaps could be candidates for local green space status in the next iteration of the Cheltenham Plan, and it would be great to see that status expand rather than contract. And he finally talks about the public green space designation. That does exist in local plans, although it's not a core designation in national planning policy. Yes, that can, and I think is actually included in the Cheltenham Plan, and again could be applied to some areas, and there's one recent example in All Saints I know that has been brought up by Councillor Clark, which somehow got missed in that process and could indeed be designated as public open space, or maybe even get local green space status under the NPPF in a future iteration of the plan. So all of these things can be considered, and I look forward to his contributions to that green list in the next iteration of the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Horwood, for bringing this forward, and for actually all the years and 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 years you've been working on protecting local green space for communities. I think actually if you just stop a minute and actually just reflect over the last 18 months how important local green space was to residents in our town, across this whole country during this pandemic. And I can personally say I've sat amongst some of my trees in my little green space and just breathed slightly just when there's been moments of that have been quite tough. So I'm really grateful for you bringing this forward. I wanted to speak because there's 3 local green spaces in there in my ward, and which I'm really grateful for. But the one that concerns me slightly is the one around Henley Road. And for colleagues that aren't aware of Henley Road, it actually is a hedge line plus a little bit of green space that will effectively be part next to or right on top of the West Cheltenham development. Unfortunately, not the bits of land that the borough are in ownership of, which I would give me more influence, you may say, as a ward councillor, but actually the private developers there. Now, through the whole months of the joint core strategy coming to its end, and where we are now, that little bit of community hasn't had the voice that other communities have had over the years in trying to protect some green space. They put forward a plan. They were told by the Borough Council it was too early. And I get that. And I get that at some point a developer will come forward with an application. I've lobbied the relevant cabinet member in terms of West Cheltenham. I'm obviously throwing myself at your mercy in terms of any help you can throw my way to support those residents. Because actually, having a little bit of green space and a hedge is one thing, but actually the community, the existing community, not just Springbank, but those that access that route through to, I think it's the House in the Tree pub, it's quite important to them. So every given opportunity, I'm lobbying and mentioning that is their preferred piece for green space. Not only for them, but for the new community in West Cheltenham when it comes on stream. So I'm really grateful for your continued endeavours into protecting the whole green space, and thank you for the opportunity to mention my ward. Thank you.
Councillor Atherson, you dropped off the list. Did you want to speak before Councillor Willingham? Please, that's okay with you, Councillor Willingham? Vic's dropped off for some reason, but if you could.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Horwood, for bringing this motion to us today. I know we have to build as a part of the government's next planning in terms of creating homes for people to live in and especially affordable houses, but I'm so pleased that you're putting just as much emphasis on protection. Like Councillor Jeffreys has just said, I have friends, family, work colleagues that live in much more urban areas and really, really struggled without the lack of really, really local green space. And we, where we're lacking funding perhaps nationally for mental health and well-being, having that green space does actually go that way in terms of providing an environment that you can have mindful walks and be at one with nature. So thank you ever so much. I think, you mentioned in terms of potential zoning in the future that could, has the potential to kibosh certain protected green spaces. So, yeah, thank you for this motion. I'll be fully supporting it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. What I wanted to draw the Council's attention to is some of the things that maybe we need to look at as well around this. There are various bits of green space that currently aren't protected, that currently we need to look at how to protect. There are small bits of land, and I'll give you some examples in the ward I represent, and also in the division I represent as a county councillor, and those include the green space in the centre of St Peter's Square, the green space in the centre of Lee Close, Clevedon Square, Norfolk Avenue, the green space around Monks Croft, Wasley's Break, the nature reserve off of Griffiths Avenue. None of those appear to be coloured in on the council's green spaces map. Very close to the division I represent, we have Coronation Square, which is a green space that nobody can actually get to because there isn't really a safe way of getting onto it or off of it. There's also opportunities. There is an opportunity on Tewkesbury Road, next to one of the most polluted bits of town because of in the air quality management area, to create a linear park. We need to think about doing that. We also need to look at how to re-energise friends groups. I know Councillor Pinniger, who's not here today, has been trying to get a friends group for KG5 in St Mark's. We have an award-winning friends group in Winston Churchill Memorial Garden and the Honeybourne line, having just got their green flag, and I would thank those volunteers for that. I'm really keen to work out how we try and get a friends group for St Peter's Park. When it comes to development, we also need to look at making sure that green corridors are properly protected. There is currently a missing link in what could be a path to rival the Honeybourne line, which is Chelt Walk. And we need to make sure that the Chelt Walk corridor, which would run from the town centre through St Peter's Ward and then on into Springbank, is protected. That missing link needs to be protected. We need to make sure that the land behind the alternative provision school on Alston Lane, which is currently earmarked for development, is not overdeveloped. The school serves some of the most disadvantaged pupils in the county, and not just from Cheltenham but from Tewkesbury as well, and providing extra fields for them to use would seem likely to have better outcomes than just filling it full of housing. And I understand it's owned by the local diocese, and I hope that both churches involved in this would be charitable enough to see the benefits that this could give to society. I also hope that when, as and when Lansdowne North comes forward, which is in St Mark's, that has enough green space. So this zoning proposal gives me concern that we do, wherever we allow development to happen, make enough provision for green space for people. You know, there is a much wider set of things that we need to do, but I really welcome this motion, so thank you.
Brilliant, it's working, that's a good start. So let me just actually get my speech out because I've just put it in my pocket. I will first start by saying thank you to my good friend. I know, I will. Just trying to keep us all safe, but there we go. So I will start firstly by thanking my very good friend and colleague, Councillor Martin Horwood. This is a top-notch motion, as anyone would expect from Martin. I do completely support the substance of the motion, and it's really well-placed aim to, you know, protect the green spaces of our town, because any of us who have been through the pandemic, which is all of us, have at some point made the most of these fantastic green spaces. But I can't help reflect on the motion's emphasis on the council's commitment to the physical and mental well-being of those in our town. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's incredibly important that we implement this as part of our planning policy. Everything we do as a council through planning ought to have that focus. But I do think there's another aspect of planning that could retain this equal commitment, and I think it's worth colleagues considering that at this moment. As I did discuss last time we were in council in the wonderful Pittville pump room, there are residents living in my council ward who are living in overcrowded accommodation, facing mould, pest infestations, and just generally environments that are, quite frankly, a tinderbox for infections, COVID pandemics, and any sort of major issue that any close-knit group of people living in a house that simply isn't built for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people to be living in, they are very much at that risk. They are in this situation because the reality is that Cheltenham does not build enough homes. We have not got enough homes in our town to meet the needs of our community, and those we build aren't always up to the standard that we would hope for. I think if we're really determined to put the health and welfare of residents at the centre of our planning policy and the environments that they live in at the centre of our housing policy, we need to be very serious about the reality that we are going to have to build an awful lot more homes, and regrettably, not all of them will be able to be built on old shops or old junkyards. There will, in some circumstances, be a need to build homes on sites that are greener than maybe we would otherwise wish. I think it's not just about meeting national government quotas, because frankly, I think the numbers that the government cite for what we need in Cheltenham don't even come close to scratching the surface. And for every home that we don't have, that we should have, residents in our town are paying an absolutely extortionate amount of money to live in conditions that simply aren't right. If we want to invest in improving the environments that the residents in our town live in, we have to equally invest in building the homes we need, and we need to build them, especially within sort of our town centre area, as good quality, dense homes, which will not only provide the homes we need in the places where we need them, where whole streets are being gutted to build HMOs that frankly just aren't fit for purpose. If we build houses in the ways that we need to, if they're dense, if they're good quality, and if they're environmentally friendly, we can meet the needs of our community, and we can ensure every single person in this town lives in a safe, clean, affordable home. So any consideration we want to put forward about the environment has to very seriously consider the environment that people spend the vast majority of their time in. So I don't seek to amend the motion. I have nothing but support for Councillor Horwood's motion. But I do think we as a group have to consider the environment people live in, not just in terms of parks and green spaces, but the homes in which they live, and how we can reconcile those two sometimes conflicting planning priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am aware, I think Councillor Clucas was well before me, but for some reason her presser isn't working, so I'll just mention that. I didn't want to do a long speech. I completely support the views that are put forward in this motion. But I just wanted to say many congratulations to, I think it's 6 parks, including my own local Hatherley Park, who have got Green Flag Awards recently. You know, this is all part of our push to improve the environment, and I know a lot of work's gone into all that. So I just wanted to mention them and you know, say thank you to all the people involved in it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Clucas.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make a few quick comments. The first is, yes, we need homes, but let's not forget, more than 1 million homes in this country have planning consent, and they're not being built. And they're not being built because builders are sitting on the land. That's what's happening. Those 1 million homes could make a huge difference to the shortfall that we have in homes in this country. What I wanted to say is this. Martin, I want to thank you actually for the work you did on the local green space, because I know when we were fighting for Swindon Village green space, all of that community was behind what we were doing. And what we have done by saving and securing that green space, by working together, when we have about 4,500 new homes being built in that area, is to give a meeting space for people, a place for children to play, an area where people can just go for a walk, where they're not concerned about whether they're trespassing on somebody's land, because that is available to them, and where we can actually begin to save wildlife in that area too. So it isn't just a question of saying, well, yeah, you've got your green space. It's, this is what it's for. And certainly, looking at what happened over COVID, those people, as has been said, who had access to green space have come through this in a much, much better mental and physical condition. And I think that has to be acknowledged. So while I understand what is being said about new homes, I think we also need to acknowledge the value our local green spaces give. And I can say now, and I'm sure I can speak for Councillor Fisher, Swindon Village will retain its green space as long as we are here, because we will fight with the community so to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clucas. Does any other member wish to speak before I go back to Councillor Fisher to speak in seconding and then move to Councillor Horwood? I've got, I can see him. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler in the cheap seats.
This is the dress circle, it's not the cheap seats. Yes. No, I wasn't going to speak, but I was just thinking, you know, the West of Cheltenham development, and I very much agree with much of what Councillor Lewis just said. Yes, we do need more homes, and yes, we do need green spaces. Quite frankly, I don't see it's either or. I think it is both. And a comment, I've been working with the Hester's Way Partnership, along with Councillor Flynn, to put together a neighbourhood plan. And someone on that group actually made the comment that, you know, I'd been saying, you know, I'd love to see all those fields remain green fields, but I do understand that we need more homes, we need more workspaces. And someone actually said, well, that's all very well, but at the moment we have green fields that are simply green fields. When that area is developed, hopefully, and thinking that it's Cheltenham land, that land will be more accessible. So we will actually be getting, I think, something like 4,000 new homes. an awful lot of office space, very much needed, high quality jobs, and green space that is really useful to us. So I think we, you know, and some of this is down to Martin's local green space. So I think this is going to be very useful, and I think we must be a little bit shy of saying, well, it's either or. I think it'll be very much both in many ways.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. And you're absolutely right. Henceforth, when members are in that position where you're sitting, it shall be the dress circle. I was actually waiting on Councillor Clucas doing a John Lennon and saying about dangling your jewellery and so on in the cheap seats, but you didn't. No. Anybody else wish to speak before I offer it to Councillor Fisher to second the motion and then Councillor Horwood to sum up everything that he's heard? No? Okay, Councillor Fisher, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Marty, because without his efforts, we wouldn't have local green spaces to talk about. And I'd like to thank some people who are no longer councillors, because there's people like Malcolm Stennett, John Webster, Paul Massey. I was a relatively young man when we set out on this task. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I wasn't even a councillor. I was a resident of Swindon Village. I lived just inside Hyde Lane. And people said to me, you're a local person, you're a member of the Liberal Party, join Friends of Save the Countryside, because they want some help. And John Webster encouraged me, but he didn't encourage me, he forced me. That's the way John operated. And I did, and I've become friends with people like Helen, Aaron, Anne, Mike, Sean, Kit, who over the years we worked, and with the local green space strategy coming in, we convinced the planning inspector in this chamber, Miss Ord, to come and look at our place and have a look at our village, which is a lovely place. And she came and looked and was convinced. And where developers would not budge, she said to them quite plainly, either you agree with these people, a local green space, or I will tell you. And in the end, she told them. And we're very grateful. But there's also, it's for the future. West Cheltenham's been mentioned. That, I'm sure, will incorporate local green space, and must. Because you don't make friends with people you're back to back with. You make friends with people who you openly meet across a local green space, where your kids go and kick a football around or do whatever they do, and where you walk the dog, and where you ride your bike. And the protection that we have created is great. Places like the Cheltenham Town Football Club's training ground, that was owned by an insurance company who could see the potential for a £4 million sale there, and we got it included in the local green space. We can't walk my dog across there because Cheltenham Town footballers are training on it, but it doesn't have to be there. You can look across it. There's farmland that's in the local green space. Somebody mentioned Coronation Square. The birds and the fox and everybody else uses that local green space, and that's what it's for. It's there as open space. As regards the future of housing, when it eventually comes forward, the consortium in Swindon Village will be the largest housing development this town has ever seen. It will be on green belt land that was formerly green belt. And the key thing here is part of the deal. The people of Swindon Village, the people of Leckhampton, and all the other places where there's development going on, agreed to this subject to the green space. So we don't want developers trying to renege on the deal or jigger it about. That green space should be there for the next generations and the generations after that, when nobody remembers why it was set up, but it's there. It's like Swindon Village playing field. It's there. Everybody loves it, but nobody knows where it originated. During the war, it was a prisoner of war camp. But it's not now. It's one of the nicest open green spaces in the town. Some magnificent trees. So please support this motion. I thank again Martin and all the people who are no longer councillors and who have never been councillors and have no ambition to be councillors, who have worked tirelessly in all quarters of Cheltenham to make this sort of thing happen. And this will give us the protection we need. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I'll just ask Councillor Horwood to sum it up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Fisher for one so young. His eloquence is impressive, and of course he's exactly right in what he says about how in a sense, the deal is that you can have these protections, and that gives you the confidence to then plan homes that are badly needed where communities want them. And he's also right to pay tribute to the generations of campaigners in different parts of the town who've been part of the campaigns that have achieved these local green spaces. To Councillor Barrell, I'd certainly agree to congratulate those parks that have achieved green flag status, and it's part of a whole tapestry of different green spaces with different roles and different functions, and that have different values to the community, but all of them part of making this a really pleasant town in which to live. To Councillors Lewis and Clucas and Wheeler, who all addressed housing in different ways, you all made very good points, and I think Councillor Lewis is exactly right. We do need to concentrate on the quality of the homes that are built as well, and the nature of those homes, and particularly with the climate emergency and the need for those homes to be zero carbon and the need for them to be high quality. It would just be better if we had government and planning law that enabled our officers to be tougher with potential house builders and developers in meeting those kind of standards and didn't live in constant fear of being taken to appeal over a raft of minute details. And actually, if we look at communities in other countries, they have much more power over the housing that is built than I'm afraid we do here. But she made a very good point on that. But like Councillors Clucas and Wheeler, I would just caution that this isn't just about the numbers. If we look historically, Cheltenham has grown by at least 50% since the 1950s. We have built houses and houses and houses, hundreds and thousands of houses, and yet we still have a housing waiting list, and we still have very unaffordable housing. Why? Because actually this is a very good place to live. We have good schools, we have the countryside until it's all built on, we have jobs, and we have a relatively healthy local economy. So people will always try to move here and to live here. And there is a slight fear that if you keep on being market-led in housing numbers, that you will end up just building over the very things that are so valuable to people and the reason they move here. But the important point she made, and that all councillors have made, is that actually the quality of the housing and the nature of the housing is important. And not very many houses are tackling housing waiting lists by building new social housing for rent. And I'm really proud that this is one of the councils that is doing that. And if Councillor Collins was here, oh, he's here, sorry. I beg his pardon. I would have expected him to have been leaping to his feet to make that very point. But he and Councillor Jeffreys and many others who've contributed to the active role this council is playing in building new social housing for rent that really does target those on the housing waiting list. That's a very important contribution. And the fact that we have such an ambitious target for affordable housing, 40% of major new developments, which is being stuck to in Leckhampton. I hope it will be stuck to in northwest Cheltenham and west of Cheltenham as well, and that help to tackle the affordability crisis over time, although that's a real challenge. So I thank everyone for their kind comments and for their support for this motion, and I hope to see it pass. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion. I think Councillor Collins was controlling himself. He's trying to sort of keep his enthusiasm for the housing in, but I think the point was well made, and I think Councillor Collins would acknowledge that. Right, councillors, we now move to the vote. You've seen the motion. Can I have a show of hands, please, all those in favour of the motion as posed? That is once again unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, we now move to agenda item 14, which is any other item the Mayor determines as urgent and which requires a decision. Now, I have a Mayor's briefing prior to the full Council, which the leaders of the three groups in the Chamber are always invited to and always very often in attendance. And there was initial advice given to, I think, the motion mover, Councillor Clucas, that this wasn't regarded as urgent. And that's what was put to me at the Mayor's briefing. And I argued otherwise, because I think it is incumbent on bodies that purport to represent the people of our town and wider are honest with not just the good bits, but also the bad bits. And I'm referring, I think, to the black alert, which wasn't advised to the Health and Oversight Committee. That are, we have two members on, actually. We have the official borough representative, Councillor Barrell, but we also have Councillor Fifield as a county rep. So it was put to me that this was urgent, and I agreed. And I've got my notes here, which says I took the advice of Tim Atkins as acting CEO and also the monitoring officer. And whilst I respect and appreciate that all advice I am given as Chair of Council, I respect it and I appreciate it, I would merely add that one of the things we were worried about, actually, was the item being taken over for other purposes. And I asked that I be allowed to discriminate between what was going to be an urgent item and others that were not. But I considered people waiting for over 10 hours in an ambulance to be worthy of discussion by this council. I don't expect there to be a solution tomorrow. I do expect there to be a patting on the head from the Secretary of State and HOSC to thank us for our input. But we need to say something. And I'd like to give this council an opportunity to say it, not just on behalf of the people of Cheltenham, but on behalf of the people of East Gloucestershire, because this used to be the East Gloucestershire NHS Trust. So a population of 116,000, we're now looking at 250,000 plus. And there are other councils that have made representation about this. And I think we have been fairly consistent. So I think that people waiting in an ambulance for 10 hours to be seen is also meaning that an ambulance is tied up and not being able to go to a 999 call. And on that basis, I considered this item to be urgent, and with respect to the advice which I always listen to from Tim Atkins and also the monitoring officer, I decided that this needed to be discussed today. As I say, I don't expect an overnight resolution to anything. I do know from my research that other motions have gone to central government and the council have either received an acknowledgement of the motion or there's been nothing said. But I wanted to be able to look to my residents and my family in the eye and say that we as a council have done what we can, what is within our limited powers to do to support a type 1 A&E at the hospital. And we can honestly do that if we raise it in this chamber and we discuss it. And I can't believe anybody is going to talk against it, but everyone should have the opportunity to. And it's important that we maintain this consistent voice. So, Councillor Clucas, I'm really sorry if I've said anything that you're about to say in terms of moving the motion, but I was advised I did need to explain why the Mayor considered this urgent. I think people passing away was worthy of our attention today, and that's why we're having it. So I would like to invite Councillor Clucas to move this motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very mindful indeed of something that Councillor Horwood has said earlier and something which other colleagues also said, that this is not a day for party political gesturing. This is a day for coming together as a council and making sure that our voice is heard on something that with which we can all agree rather than seeking to fight. And I thank Councillor Payne for seconding this, and I also thank Councillor Mason for saying that he will take this through overview and scrutiny. Mr. Mayor, the motion that is there is quite specific. It deals with issues which are, frankly, of great concern to most people. And before I go any further, all of you colleagues will have received from Councillor Barrell today an email, I think at 14:24, which has come from the HOSC Democratic Services people. And I'd like you to turn it on if you've got your iPads with you. And the reason this is going through, I hope, to overview and scrutiny is this. I shall read it to you in case you can't find it. It says, this is in relation to the HOSC meeting. As discussed at the meeting, for Gloucestershire, the Ambulance Trust has a black, black resource escalation action plan currently in place. The highest level of escalation for ambulance trusts. This is due to a number of factors, but includes a significant increase in 999 calls and the impact of wider health and social care pressures upon flow. The current level of system escalation is operational pressures escalation level Opal 3 red. And if you go down, what you will see is Opal 3 red. This is describing what it is like in the hospital system now, okay? 4-hour performance significantly compromised. Local health and social care system experiencing major pressures compromising patient flow, and these continue to increase. Actions taken in Opal 2 have not succeeded in returning the system to Opal 1. Further urgent actions are now required across the system by all A&E delivery partners, and increased external support may be required. Regional teams in NHS England and NHS 1, including the regional director, will be made aware of rising system pressure, providing additional support as deemed appropriate and agreed locally. Now, the reason I've read that out, Chair, it's a bit health speak, I'm afraid. But the reason I read that out is because what that says is this. The system is failing. We haven't got enough staff. We're looking potentially at security issues for those staff. And also, when we look at this, we're actually having a problem in relation to safety for our patients. So the 4 S's are at work here. And what I would suggest, colleagues, what I would say to each of you is this. We know from information that's being given by those working for the Trust that things are really not terribly good, that people are leaving even now. We know the chair is going to step down early next year. That has already been acknowledged. And so we have a real problem in relation to this. The way this Trust is operating is not sufficiently good for the people it is seeking to serve. And that's why I have brought this forward. This is not to say, oh, not enough money in the system, not enough this, not enough that. This is about how the Trust is managing its resources and how the Trust is ensuring that things are being properly done. That's what this motion is seeking to look at. And that's why it's very important indeed that this motion should go through, as it is, to overview and scrutiny, so that we can actually have, through O&S, a proper response to all of the questions that are being asked about how you get staff, why staff are leaving, how are you going to encourage people to come in, how are you going to maintain services if you haven't got the staff, a whole host of things which are in the purview of the Trust. And that's why, colleagues, I would ask you to support this as it is, so that we can actually begin to ask the questions and, most importantly, get the right answers for those that we represent.
Thank you, Councillor Clucas. Councillor Payne, would you like to speak now, or you reserve your right to speak later?
I'll reserve my speech till later.
Thank you. Okay, well, Councillor Harman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll say a few words. Councillor Mason may be saying it for me, I think, actually, but I'll make a few comments. I think it's a good thing that we're having this motion here today. I should say, incidentally, you will see me at the HOS meeting, but I'm not a voting member. I sit there as a cabinet member to offer any advice that they might ask on public health. So I did check this morning at Gloucester, and I'm not in any way fettered from speaking today. I did think, when I saw this, it slightly concerned me that the wording is a bit brutal, but I think the spirit is right. What I'd say is, when I was chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, when we had the concerns about the changes to A&E in Cheltenham, although Cheltenham doesn't have the statutory duty that HOSC has, I extended an invitation as chairman to the trust to come and make a presentation to the committee, which we did in this chamber, with me chairing it. I worked on it with Pat Prattley, the chief executive, and I think, if I remember, we opened it up to any member of the council to come. If that is the intention, I think that's a good way forward, because the trust must have a chance to answer. And with, as we said earlier on, the very effective scrutiny process that we have with Councillor Mason, I think that's a positive way forward. And if that's the intention, you will certainly have my support. And I mean, certainly, you have to be a blind man to see that there are problems. There really are problems. Notwithstanding the fact we know we're getting more investment, but it doesn't stop the immediate problem. So that's the issue. And the investment takes a while to show a dividend. So if that is the intention, we would support it. And I think if you do extend an invitation, and you talk to them about wanting to know about the current situation and their winter plan, I think that's crucial, and I think that would be a very healthy process. So Councillor Mason may wish to say something else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harman. So you're still the Cabinet Member for Public Health? Okay, and you're allowed to speak. That's fantastic, because you were barred from speaking before, so that's great. They got clearance, that's the main thing, so that's good. So thank you for your supportive words. Councillor Mason.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say Flo then. I'll say Flo anyway. As Flo said, I'm very happy. This has got to come to overview and scrutiny, because no matter what we say today, this is one side of the coin. We have to allow the trust. It's right we challenge the trust, and what I'll be doing, I'll be working with John and with Alex on the chairs group so we can actually get this together, so we give a brief to the trust of what it is we want to do. We will do our usual procedure now, where we will ask for a report beforehand. That will be then made available. And what I would encourage members to do is, if they would like questions raised in that, so that we can manage it, if they can forward, as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, any questions that they would like to raise, then I will get that put forward to it. I think that might be a more manageable way of doing it. But whatever way it is done, we will allow members of this council to put forward questions to the trust, and we will invite them. Now, of course, we can't force them to come, but they'd have to explain why they're not coming if they don't of our wonderful invitation. And of course, we'll do exactly the same thing. As chair, they will be given every courtesy, they will be treated professionally, and they will be challenged, but in the right way. And I know it's going to go up for debate now. My only thing is that be mindful what you say now, because it might influence what happens at overview and scrutiny. And Flo, by the way, you completely lost me with all your opals. So that's what, but the point that I'm making is I'm not a professional person, so I think we need to I just need time to reflect it myself. But yeah, I'm sure in the not too distant future, a letter will be going to the trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, I was in the session in this chamber when I was the Borough Council member of HOSC, when Councillor Harman got the trust to come and answer our questions. So keep the dialogue going. But it's interesting that in my own discussions when I was on the HOSC, the current chief exec thinks that she's only answerable to her membership. When I asked who her membership were, she said the 10,000 people on our mailing list. And I said, well, that's a mailing list, that's not a membership. Now, there are governors that are appointed. I believe we've had a mention from Councillor Babbage that he's one of the governors, but it's a very interesting argument that I'm only responsible to my members, and then cites a membership mailing list, which is absolutely bonkers. I've got Councillor Barrell, then I've got Councillor Stafford in the dress circle.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Flo Clucas and to Chris Mason for the words that they've said. And I want to begin by saying thank you to all the healthcare workers who are working so hard at the moment. I do think we need to register our thanks to everybody at all levels because, you know, there are pressures in all the healthcare services. It's so important that they're recognised and thanked. So I'm beginning with that. I believe that the concerns mentioned in this motion are legitimate ones. Unfortunately, at our HOSC meeting last Tuesday, we didn't have full up-to-date information about the situation, quite how serious it is. You know, to have this. I thought a black alert was an Opal 4, but I might be wrong about that. Anyway, to have it for such a long period, from September into October, I believe is you know, very, very serious. And my own questions as a committee member would have been very much focused around this and the up-to-date things that were actually happening. We need to know that every measure possible is being taken to keep patients and our local community safe, and that sufficient resources are available to them to do this. I will mention that many of the topics in this motion were covered in detail at the HOSC meeting. The Hospital Trust reported on their winter plans. They did a presentation. The Ambulance Trust also did a presentation. And there was quite a lot of questioning about such things as their ways of coordinating services, response to serious incidents, mental health support for staff, and other measures to address various issues. You know, everyone is tired and under pressure, you know, after what we've been through with the COVID, which still continues. So we need to give all the support we can. It's difficult in HOSC to be a critical friend if we don't actually see the seriousness of the situation, because we all want to work together on this. Everybody at every level, I do believe, are trying their best to get things right. And if things aren't going as right as you'd like them to get to be, you know, it's important that we share this, and that you know, perhaps our questioning and maybe our suggestions, etc., could bear fruit. So I do think it's important that this comes to our own overview and scrutiny committee. I noticed that the last sentence here, you know, on the motion as it stands at the moment, is asking for an emergency meeting of the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That's the HOSC. And I do think that needs to be changed if Flo Clucas is agreeable to this. Because if you look at the wording up there, which is still the official wording, it does suggest that HOSC should have an emergency meeting. And seeing as we've just had a meeting, I don't think this would help. So I would ask Councillor Clucas if she would agree to have that wording changed to reflect that we are actually asking our own overview and scrutiny to look at this. I also might mention that I do think if any letters are to be sent to, you know, government officials, as is suggested there, these should only be sent if the serious concerns remain after the Trust has had the opportunity to answer questions and give any necessary explanations. If we're still worried about it, that's the time that letters should be sent. I don't see that it as my role as a HOSC, you know, as the CBC representative on HOSC, to actually send a letter. I think it would be more suitable perhaps coming from the, you know, the chair of overview and scrutiny or the leader, if it's about our concerns as a Cheltenham Council. So, you know, I think that would be very helpful. And thank you very much to everyone, you know, involved in all this. We're all wanting the best. Thank you.
Clarify something about who should write the letter, because I had a motion seconded in this chamber 4 years ago, and the leader of the council wrote to various persons at the appropriate levels. And it came back from the HOSC, the then chairman of the HOSC, who's now sadly no longer with us, and also the local MP, that if Cheltenham Borough Council has got issues with what the trust is doing, they should go through from the HOSC representative, the borough representative, not the leader of the council. So that's why part of the motion was worded that way, that there is experience that it's been tried before, and they said, no, we don't want to hear from the leader of the council or the mayor, we want to hear from the representative of the HOSC. So unless that's changed, and it might have done because personalities change and therefore, directions change. In terms of the bottom line there, which I think Councillor Clucas is talking to with Democratic Services Bev, I thought that had been changed anyway. It's a very, very dynamic environment, because I'm still waiting on hearing whether there's an amendment to the motion or not. But I think this is an original draft that hasn't been changed yet. So I think that requirement had come out. So thank you for raising it, Councillor Barrell, because I think that's been changed. I'm going up to the address circle. Councillor Stafford.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really important issue, and there are obviously serious issues within the Trust, but I haven't been given enough time to scrutinise this motion, which, as Councillor Harman has said, is worded rather brutally in places. As I understand from Councillor Barrell's update just now, some of the questions in the motion have already been answered at HOSC. And while I have full respect for Councillor Barrell, I really don't see why a Secretary of State would respond to a letter from an ordinary opposition member of a committee of another council. So that does seem like an odd request towards her. I can see that this is being changed to reflect that it means overview and scrutiny in the end there, but this is a matter for our over and scrutiny in my mind, and I'd like it to be taken there and moved forward from there, which is not as written in this motion. At this point, I can't support that motion because I don't think it addresses the issue from a Cheltenham Borough Council point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. I think it's been rewritten as we... yeah, there you go. It has been written. Does any other member have any comments to make? Oh, Councillor Willingham. Sorry. Point of order. Oh, point of order. Oh, thank you. Haven't had one of those.
Some amendments seem to be being discussed. Can we know what the changes to that motion are, perhaps?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I'll go to our new monitoring officer and ask, when does that come to the fore? Should we wait a few moments for those revised wording from Councillor Lucas? Democratic Services come?
I think it would be worth waiting for that draft. Can you hear me now? I think it might be appropriate to wait to see what these variations amount to before deciding whether or not this is a wholehearted amendment of what is a proposal before the council presently. So I understand Councillor Lucas is just making the...
I can do it now. If I may, I will read out the motion and you can see where the changes are. So this was the motion I thought I had sent to you, Bev, and I will actually check it through because I'm sure I sent that the other day. Emergency motion, emergency situation in our hospitals. Recent reports in national newspapers concerned Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust declaration of a black alert, which was declared on the 19th of September and lasted until the 5th of October. A black alert is used when patients are at serious risk and their safety cannot be guaranteed by the trust, nor can the trust provide normal services. In view of the impact on Cheltenham residents and those of the wider East Gloucestershire area, which CGH serves, of such a lengthy black alert, Council has requested to ask the Council's representative on the Gloucestershire Health and Social Care Committee to write to the Secretary of State, CQC, and the HOSC outlining Council's concerns. I would like to replace the representative on the Gloucestershire Health and Social Care Committee to the leader of the Council. Concerning the Council's concerns, which are, why was the black alert not made known to HOSC? Why has the Trust not been open about this with the public? How does the Trust expect to retain staff when it's placing such intolerable pressure on them? How will the Trust retain staff when winter pressures worsen in January and February? With long-term staff retiring, how is the Trust going to recruit more staff? Further, to...
Catch up with amending on the screen. If you don't mind just bearing with Democratic Services, I know Aaron's a very good typist.
Okay.
Very good typist, but you could just bear with him while he's...
I can send you a copy, Harry. It'll take a second. Further, to convene an emergency meeting with GHT, that's the Hospitals Trust, through the O&S Committee to raise these matters with the Hospital Trust Chief Executive and Medical Leads. That was the amended motion that I thought I had sent to Bev. I will check that now and just make sure that it did go. I can't see it now.
Just send it.
Yeah.
Just send it, and then they can...
Yeah, okay.
Fleur, can you... Fleur, just... I thought that you made a... Are you able to check on the screen just to make sure that, like, I just want to make sure that everyone's checking. I think you said something about whether you got about the HOSC committee. You talked about social care.
That's fine.
I just want to make sure everyone's voting on the right wording.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Could I... Could I just clarify that? Is it further to convene an emergency meeting with the O&S committee? Or, who is the emergency meeting with? I mean, the GHT comes along and it's brokered through the O&S committee, but who's GHT actually holding the meeting with? So is it an emergency meeting with the Cheltenham Borough Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee?
Yes.
That's not how it reads, though. It doesn't actually say that. An emergency meeting with blank, between GHT and someone through the O&S committee.
Right.
So I think it should be an emergency meeting with the O&S committee. Well, wasn't it going to be with them? Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree and it's clear with everyone else. So if it's to be with it's not to be with the HOSC, and that seems very sensible to me as a former chairman of HOSC. Is the sense of this that GHT comes to the O&S committee and we can all come along to the O&S committee, which I think the chair was indicating in the past. Yeah. So as long as that understanding is there, so through the O&S committee might just mean brokered by the O&S committee, and that meeting could be with whoever. So that's just the way it reads to me, is a little bit confusing, that's all.
Yes, if I can. It sounds like that the ONS are facilitating a meeting through rather than it actually being a collective meeting. So I think the wording isn't quite precise enough there to ensure that everybody's included in that meeting.
Yes,
See, we're paying him now, you see. Bear with, because that takes time to get the words from there to there to there. So, and I'm not telling any jokes. I'll assume that Councillor Clucas is revising the wording and sending it through to Dem Services, Harry. Sure, yeah. And I'll raise my own point of order, which is about the amount of time that this emergency motion is having. So we need to expedite it, please.
Further, that O&S Committee be requested to convene an emergency meeting with GHT to raise these matters with the Hospital Trust's Chief Executive and medical leads. That was sent through. I can't read the screen. It's correct.
Democracy live in progress. Nothing behind hidden doors. Everything transparent, warts and all. I am concerned about the time, but I think we might be there now. There's still some whispering going on. Pubs are open, you know. Good to go? Okay. Motion is on the screen behind me as Councillor Klukas thought it had originally gone through as. Right, so did any other member wish to speak? I think Councillor Lewis. Yeah, sorry, I've just been told Councillor Willingham's in before you, Alicia.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to sort out which bit of IT everything is on. I want to actually raise the human side of this from personal experience. So, a short while ago, I saw firsthand the huge amount of distress caused to other family members, to a neighbour. I won't identify them any further. They had been taken ill in quite a serious fashion, something that needed them to be taken to a hospital within the golden hour, really. That's something that the medical professionals talk about. They called an ambulance on 999. The ambulance didn't turn up. They called an ambulance again on 999. The ambulance still didn't turn up. They were getting so desperate that, along with other neighbours, I was asked whether I could help get the person into a car so that they could be taken by car to a hospital. Now, when people are thinking about whether they need to wait for an ambulance with trained paramedics or whether they need to take a family member to hospital themselves, we're in a pretty serious situation. Fortunately, we phoned again because the situation was worsening, and eventually an ambulance turned up and they were able to be treated. My guidance was that we needed to wait because if we managed to get the person into a car, there would be no one at the other end to get them out, and there would be no guarantee that they would be treated any quicker. This is the personal impact that this is having. Now, this is not down to the ambulance service, and other colleagues have thanked all of the frontline NHS staff, and I would associate myself wholeheartedly with that thanks. But there is a serious problem. And from the reports that went to HOSC, which, again, as a county councillor I've had sight of, it would appear to be the handover time between the ambulance service and the hospitals. There were some things missing from that report, such as the handover times at Cheltenham General. And if everything is going to Gloucester Royal, then it isn't surprising that handover times are in crisis. This is the personal impact. I will also say that I have concerns about the trust. Again, from personal experience, I don't trust the trust. When you are taken to A&E, when you go to A&E and you are sat for 7 hours on solid metal benches and you raise this fact with the trust and they say, we have to have metal benches because they're the only thing we can use to be kept clean. And then you are injured somewhere else and you go to a hospital where they have chairs that have a cushion on so that you are not in need of other treatment for your backside having been sat on a metal bench for 7 hours. It's evident that the trust are being disingenuous with people that raise complaints. But it isn't just the trust. There are supposed to be £350 million a week going into the NHS, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So, whilst we can call the trust in, we don't necessarily have the oversight of them to make these changes. So, it may be that we need to look at how else we raise this, because calling it to scrutiny where scrutiny does not necessarily have the ability to force that change is somewhat concerning. I will stop there. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Fisher, then Councillor Lewis, then Councillor Babbage, then I think Councillor Collins is also indicating.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can support this 101%. In the first paragraph, it says a black alert is used when patients are at serious risk and their safety cannot be guaranteed. What's the point of a hospital where you're ill or you're taken injured that can't be trusted to look after you and care for you? No mention of the staff in A&E, where we know people are assaulted in A&E, people who work. The safety of the staff must be compromised if we're in a black alert as well. I won't bore you with my recent family trips to hospitals in this county, but I have been a regular client of A&E over the years, playing football, rugby, cricket, falling off horses, and many other things. My recent experience is horrific. It was something so simple, but 5.5 hours later, we were no further forward, and we had to go from Cheltenham to Gloucester Royal because Cheltenham couldn't see us. Now, I drove my family member there, but it is in the worst state I've ever seen it. And we need to get something done. People could be dying that we don't know. We need honesty. We need what we said before about people keeping their side of the bargain. We said in the previous motion. And this, the trust, we've got to be able to trust. And as Councillor Whittingham says, I got little trust in the trust. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Lewis, then Babbage, then Collins. Councillor Lewis.
That's working. A point of order, Mr. Mayor, you do have a substantive amendment to consider that should have been considered earlier on in this motion. When will it be?
When was that brought to my attention?
It's in the hands of the monitoring officer and discussed. We literally discussed it in the room about half an hour ago.
If you're talking about an amendment, it needs to be moved, it needs to be proposed and seconded before it can be debated. So it isn't for me to move or propose an amendment.
No, I know that, but it should have been considered earlier in the motion.
Well, with a greater respect, it's in your power and possession to introduce an amendment.
Yeah, nothing, I mean, I'm not ruling it out, Councillor Lewis. I'm just saying nothing's been said to me today, officially, as chair of the meeting. Well, okay, fine. I'm not stopping you from doing it, as is your right, but we have a time limit on how we can do these things, and we've really encroached into that, but you could have mentioned this before.
I think we've been discussing it all day, but let's not do that. So first and foremost, I profoundly regret that we as a council have ended up in this situation where the amendment had to be brought to council. I worked late into the night last night to form a motion that this group could agree on that reflected the situation in a way that people were comfortable supporting. I have been met with nothing but hostility and cruelty, and I expected better. We as a council, undeniably, are no stranger to the profound challenges that the government's inability to properly fund our public services create for organisations on the front line of tackling a whole host of national crises, from coronavirus all the way through to the housing crisis. We have asked for patience as our services adapt to the challenging circumstances we're operating under. We've also asked for kindness to our staff and to our councillors as we try to adapt to these circumstances, all of which I think are reasonable asks. In asking our NHS Trust to deliver all...
Councillor Lewis, with respect, councillors can't hear what you're saying because you've not removed your mask and you're shouting and not articulating. So I'm giving you the benefit of being able to speak, but if you could please keep it short and you've removed your mask, thank you. That will help a lot. We can't hear you.
So, carrying on. In asking our NHS Trust to deliver ordinary standards of care at a time of extraordinary crisis without the funding, staff or resources required to do that vital work, we are, quite frankly, asking a fish to ride a bicycle and then getting angry when it only makes it halfway to Gloucester. Ours is not the only trust facing these challenges. Hospital trusts across the country have declared black alerts, and the ambulance and A&E times waiting across the country are, quite frankly, shameful. There are, without doubt, serious issues that we need to discuss with the Trust about their handling of this and their conduct more widely. I've experienced the ludicrous wait times firsthand, and I know how challenging and stressful that is. And this isn't me playing politics, and I do sincerely reject any allegation from anyone in this room that I would do so. I've only ever sought, as a member of this council, to do the very best for those I represent. I wholeheartedly support taking this motion to ONS to have this discussion in the appropriate setting, and for Dilys, who is our incredibly talented colleague on HOSC, to grill them accordingly. I mean, even I'm a bit scared of facing up to Dilys, so I think she could do a spectacular job. The motion as it stands, quite frankly, lets the government off the hook. The fact is that the funding and staffing crisis, while partially to blame the Trust, the government equally has its part to play. If we want to write a letter, that's absolutely fine. But I also think we should send a letter to number 10 Downing Street, and fingers crossed the PM won't be in Marbella when it arrives. The motion as it stands also fails to thank the incredibly hard-working NHS staff, which I think we have to. I don't think any discussion about the reality of the situation can be had without acknowledging that. Things are really, really quite bad. But if the staff that we have weren't working the long hours they are, underpaid and overworked as they are, it would be so, so much worse. I think fundamentally this motion is chewing at the wrong ankle, and I can't back it in its current form. I also think it should be brought before group before being taken to council. Thus, the amendment I put forward seeks to reflect the more nuanced reality of the situation with the black alert, while still upholding the same things we are asking of the Trust. So I do hope colleagues will support me. I have sent the amendment over. I don't know why it's not on screen.
Yeah, the motion's going on the screen so we can see it. Try and be measured.
Because my daughter has joined the health service as a healthcare assistant for the Communities Trust. My wife works for NHS England, and I have sought advice as to whether the amendment would preclude me from chairing the meeting. Yes, our healthcare professionals deserve praise for what they do. My wife has been working 2 jobs since COVID started last year. I don't really need any reminders from anybody as to what my wife has put in as a healthcare professional in the NHS. I really do not. And I think we are better served and serving our people by not having an angry outburst, and that we go through the proper process of the Constitution. I have not been made aware of this formally. I've given you your say, Alicia, out of respect to you. But with a daughter in the health service and a wife in the health service, I don't need any comments about. Of course they deserve our support. It's why my first public engagement as mayor was to go and thank the vaccination team. And what did I get? Criticism because they'd been there a while. And I said, well, I was only inaugurated yesterday. Give me a chance. So it's not urgent to... I'm going to draw a line there. The amendment is on the screen. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. The big one, Alicia. Do you have a seconder for your amendment? Councillor Flynn, did you wish to speak now, Wendy, or did you want to preserve your right to speak later?
I will speak now, please. Thank you. Okay. I mean, despite the earlier explanation, I'm still not entirely sure why this motion was brought as an urgent item. It's true that it's an important, not to mention obviously, emotive issue, but I think that there are different mechanisms, including direct requests to ONS, to achieve the same aims as this motion seeks to achieve. We have heard that the chair of ONS is happy to take it on. The Mayor did accept this, however, as an urgent item, so it's before us. When it comes to the motion, as put forward by Councillor Clucas, though, I cannot support it. It focuses blame for the black alert and all the circumstances surrounding it solely on the trust. But a quick Google shows black alerts are not just an issue for Gloucestershire, but for many other trusts too. The problem is much greater than an individual trust's performance. The motion as proposed by Councillor Clucas ignores this. Councillor Lewis's amendment seeks to allocate blame where it is due, in the hands of the government. It also notes the hard work and dedication of our wonderful NHS staff. The amendment still requests ONS pursues the issue through a meeting with GHT and allows ONS to decide what questions and actions are appropriate. I'm pleased to be able to second the amendment. Thank you.
Does any member have any questions on the amendment as moved by Councillor Lewis and seconded by Councillor Flynn? Okay, I've got Councillor Jeffries, I think was first. Oh no, okay, Councillor Clucas first, then Jeffries.
Just as a point of order, point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. The motion does not mention, as has just been said, the fact that there was a black alert when lots of other places had a black alert. The motion actually speaks about the fact that the Trust did not acknowledge that at the HOSC meeting. And there's a big difference between the two, especially as the black alert in Gloucestershire lasted from the 19th of September to the 5th of October.
Councillor Jeffries.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. I was just pointing to Councillor Branston with his hand up in case you were scanning the room and missed it, so my apologies.
No, I've got lots of little birds in in both ears, and it's often difficult to retain the twerps and whatever. So back up to the, if we might, to the dress circle, where they've been sitting on some hard seats for a while, so they know all about this.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a mixture of questions and points. This amendment looks absolutely fine to me. All of it makes sense. Can I just check if are we adding this to the original motion? So I'm just a little unclear about what will happen. Is this an addition or a replacement? Is my first question. Can I also point out a slight discrepancy in that, with due respect to Councillors Clucas and yourself, Mr. Mayor, we've just had another angry outburst, which was not policed by yourself, and I would just ask that members treat each other with respect and courtesy and over the course of this conversation, because obviously tensions are a little bit high, and I think we can discuss this and be nice to each other. I took issue with the tone of Councillor Clucas's contribution. I appreciate you being advised at the time. Fair enough. So can I just get a confirmation on what we're actually voting on? Because personally, I fully take the point that the blame should be put towards the government, to the funding of the NHS. I also totally understand that if the trust is failing in its duty to report its failings to us, we need to get onto that immediately and find out who's responsible for that. I don't know enough about this to know. I would assume that a black alert should be reported to all of the relevant people, and if it hasn't been, then we need to understand who has not done that.
Yeah.
And did they
Councillor Brownstein, that's why I brought it forward as an urgent item for the very point you just made. The monitoring officer is just going to, if you bear with me, update us on where the amendment stands in relation to the original motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that this amended motion is in full substitution for the original proposal. So these are not words added, these are words instead. Though you may note the actual introduction to this motion is the same as was in the original proposal.
Okay, back to Councillor Brownstein.
Thank you for clarification. In that case, it seems that we're having a conversation about whether or not to write a letter or arrange a meeting, or in which order to do that in. And so hopefully we can have that conversation calmly. So yeah, thank you for the clarification. I don't know if that counts as my opportunity to speak. I haven't decided whether or not I actually want to make a speech on the matter, but I'll put the mic down and hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
You sought clarity, Councillor Brownstein. I think I'll let you speak later. Clarity is always good. Councillor Horwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm rising just to comment on the amendment, really, and I do this with a little regret because I've worked with Councillor Lewis in 2 different assemblies now, and at all times remain a fan of hers and of her passion and commitment. But I don't think the amendment is quite right. I like the fact that it thanks the hard-working staff of our local NHS and local care staff as well. I think that's a very important point. It would be nice to see if that could be incorporated into the motion without deleting all the previous contents. But there are 4 reasons why I can't really support the amendment as it stands. The first is that I think on these kind of issues where we are talking about local health services and we are speaking as a council, it is quite important to try and put together motions that command all party support. And I would rather that we had a motion that was capable of cross-party support, whereas I would hazard a guess that that one perhaps is not. Secondly, the points that the amendment makes about steep decline in financial support is rather complicated by the COVID situation. The underlying funding for the NHS in the 5-year deal dating from 2018 is actually still on the increase, and there has been 20 billion of extra funds, more than 20 billion of extra funds going into the NHS during the pandemic. Now, those of us on this side of the chamber have long argued for a substantial and permanent increase in NHS funding, funded through income tax, and I will apologise to no one in terms of holding this government to account on NHS funding, but I think the technical wording in this motion, in this amendment, is just not quite correct, because there would always be a steep decline in what was a temporary pandemic supplement, and the underlying funding for the NHS is still on the increase, so it hasn't actually experienced a steep decline. And finally, I do think it's regrettable that the amendment as it's framed at the moment deletes the questions that we want to ask the Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust. The substantive motion doesn't actually blame the Trust for the black alert at all, as far as I read it, but it does ask a series of very pointed questions, which I think need to be asked, because I'm afraid the Trust does have a bit of form on this. And I remember when I was Councillor Barrell's predecessor on HOSC, that we were told repeatedly that the A&E departments in Cheltenham and Gloucester were meeting their waiting time targets, and we were presented with aggregated data for the whole trust. And it took repeated questions at repeated meetings to finally get that data disaggregated, which then revealed that although Cheltenham General had certainly been meeting its waiting time targets, Gloucester Royal had almost never met them and was actually in a position of getting worse. And during the pandemic, at the low point in the pandemic, when the caseload was actually, there was a point between 2 of the peaks, if you remember, even lower than now, when there were very few cases going to hospital. But even then, there was a moment when there were, I think ITV West counted 18 ambulances queued up at Gloucester Royal, and there were clearly massive capacity problems, discharge problems and other problems at the hospital's trust and the way that things were working. So it is it is quite important, and we were reassured then that everything was going to be fine and there weren't going to be further problems. But actually, there are continuing problems in the organisation of the trust, and these questions do keep getting batted away, and I think it is really important that ONS takes the lead on asking some very pointed questions of the trust. And I think to delete them all would actually weaken the motion, even though I have some sympathy with some of the things, and particularly with the thanking of NHS staff in the amendment, but I'm afraid I can't support my colleague on this occasion.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Payne is indicated to speak, and I'm going to come out to you, Councillor Payne, if you don't mind, because no, Don, I'm just going to pause for thought for a moment. I wonder if both amendment motion mover and the motion mover, we might take 15 minutes to reflect on the wording, because Councillor Hallward has covered some really valuable points. And as the HOSC member that followed Councillor Hallward, yes, the trust has got form. Having a discussion about the trust and what it's doing is one thing. Having a further discussion about the national priorities, national issues is completely outside of why I determined that this original motion was urgent. We can have a go at another time. So I'm going to adjourn this for 15 minutes. If people who would like to get together and talk about how they wish to perhaps change the wording or not, I would then like to know whether the wording has been changed, and at which point we'll then start looking at moving amendments and moving motions. But I think we need to get and there's Councillor Mason, please.
Thank you. I would really like to hear from John before we adjourn, because John normally does pearls of wisdom. All right. Right. Yeah, no pressure, John. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Actually, that is a very, very good point, and as a long-serving health professional, and you're right, he has got pearls of wisdom. So we'll hear Councillor Payne, and then we'll adjourn for 15 minutes.
I cannot guarantee pearls, but I do have considerable experience in the NHS, 30-odd years before the mast. I fully understand Councillor Lewis's motion. Fundamentally, a lot of the problems we are seeing is from underfunding, and the fact that the NHS keeps going is because of the hard work of the people who work in it. But this motion is about our local hospitals. That's the key. It's the hospitals that serve our residents. And there is clearly something wrong with the management structure. Now, we can't fix that, but we can start the process of fixing it. The fact that they didn't declare the black alert is symptomatic of the trust, and it's not unique to this trust. I worked in one of the largest trusts in this country, and they kept information back because they didn't want to be embarrassed. The problem with our trust is that it's been on a downward spiral, and the pandemic has not helped it. The underdevelopment of both Cheltenham and Gloucester has not helped. The chief executive at a trust meeting said her ambition was to make Gloucester Royal Hospital the centre of excellence where people would want to work. No one wants to work there. That's the problem. And that's a key in the health service. People are very, very conscious of where you come from, where you've worked. If you want a consultant's post, you need to have worked in somewhere that's prestigious. We have very few specialties. We have orthopedics. We have limited cardiac services. We have no neurosurgery services. Gloucestershire is very poorly served, very poorly served. They cannot attract staff. Now, today, we can't change that, but what we can do is we can start the process of change. And that's the important thing. And I hope that, I hope in this adjournment we can come to a compromise amendment, but we have to, it has to focus on the local issues. That's what we're elected for, and that's what we should be doing. Thank you very much.
Councillor Payne, thank you. And with that, I am going to adjourn for 15 minutes. If people could come back promptly when the bell or the whistle or whatever goes. to add. Is that the case, Councillor Lucas?
Just to indicate, Mr Mayor, that I will accept paragraph 2 of the amendment, but not the rest of the amendment. And that has been notified to Democratic Services.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Having had a brief discussion with Councillor Lucas, we would very much welcome and support that idea of paragraph 2 only, because there's nothing that anybody would disagree with, but we'd stick to the original motion. I'd just like to say I think Councillor Hall would put his finger on it. We need to have all party support on this, and on that basis we can give it to you.
Yeah, do we know if that's acceptable to the mover of the amendment?
No, not back in the room yet. Sorry, could I just ask for clarity, because members are looking at me and I don't necessarily have the answer, but Councillor Flynn, do you know if the inclusion of... Thank you. The leader, Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Flynn, Councillor Lewis will not be returning to the chamber, and Councillor Flynn is happy that Councillor Lucas has accepted the second paragraph of the amendment, paragraph 2 of the amendment.
I've washed my hands, can't do it. Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Leader, for that, but surely there'd be some explanation why the mover of the amendment is not here.
Not necessary, Bernie. Not necessary. I don't think there's no need to do anything like that. Councillor Collins.
Yeah, thank you. All I was going to say, even though you left me out after you listed me as the sort of the next third speaker, and then we had some changes. I know. Can we have the? Oh, is it a replacement or is it an amendment to the motion up on the screen so I can look at what second paragraph was, please? It's been put in, has it now? So I'm colourblind.
Top paragraph.
Seriously, this annoys me because everyone says it's coloured. I keep saying I cannot see colours, and I wish somebody would damn well listen to me. Yeah. So, well, I look at the top paragraph there. That is the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And if I spoke a little bit aggressively or a little bit out of turn, then I do apologise. Thank you.
Voice over the hubba. So you're welcome. My understanding from the monitoring officer and from the acting chief exec is that I take it that paragraph 2 is moving to the substantive motion, but we still have to vote on the amended motion. So unless anybody else has anything they'd like to say on the original amended motion that was put forward, which was proposed by Councillor Lewis and seconded by Councillor Flynn. I'm sorry, Councillor Lucas, what? Monitoring officer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To comply with the usual constitutional process, you need to actually decide on amendments prior to moving back to the original substantive motion. So, because the actual proposer of the motion isn't present at the moment, it will be appropriate to vote on that amendment. That will then move you back to Councillor Lucas's original proposal, which will then stand as amended as per what is on the screen. So to actually do it in the right procedural fashion, deal with the amendment first, vote on the amendment, then if that is defeated, you would move back to the original motion as amended.
Which is kind of what I actually said and then was requested for clarification. So, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm quite happy for... Well, now that we're paying the gentleman, I think we ought to get our money's worth out of him. Sorry. So, yep, sorry, the leader.
My name's Rowena, Steve. I'm Roro to my godchildren. Could I just get a question? If I thought that if an amendment had been accepted by the proposer, that becomes a part of the motion? If the amendment has been, and
I personally think it would be more appropriate to deal with the matters as per the motion that has been put before the council, and that to deal with the motion that was proposed as an amendment, and then to move to the original motion as amended by Councillor Clucas with agreement with the seconder of the amendment, not with the actual proposer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Personally, I'm very happy to vote against Councillor Lewis's motion, so we have a trail of what's happened, and then I will be very happy to vote for Councillor Clucas's motion.
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. That was where we were going. So can I just see an indication, does any other member wish to speak on the amended motion? Sorry, the amendment to the motion. No, that's not, yeah, you know what I mean. Please. You know exactly what I mean. So those in favour of the motion that was proposed by Councillor Lewis and Councillor Flynn, the amendment to the motion, thank you. See, parliamentarians, they're so useful at times. Those four? Got one. Those against? And any abstentions? No, that's interesting. You're counting, guys? Keep your hands up, please. This is abstentions, yeah. Okay, so that motion falls. Thank you. With paragraph 2 from that has now gone into the substantive motion and has been agreed by parties, I believe. Is this going to be a straight vote, or are we having more discussion? Yeah. Does anybody else want to prolong the day and talk about this next bit, or have we done it to death? I have to say that I have to ask that because I'm getting advice that that's the procedure. And sorry, guys and gals, but we have. Sorry, Tim. Ask the question. Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, I don't think Councillor Payne has seconded the motion formally for, or have you, Councillor Payne? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short, only one pearl. As I spoke before, I'm not going to reiterate it. I think the motion as we've got now is fully comprehensive. It identifies the answers that we want, and I think I would urge your support. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clucas, just to sum up, and then we'll go to the vote.
Just to say thank you to all colleagues for the contributions they've made, whether in favour or not. And just to say to colleagues, the point of this and the reason for the brutality of the questions is to get the answers that we want. We can circumvent using language, all sorts of things, but actually I want answers, and so do the people that I represent, and I'm sure the people that you represent. So if we can do that by asking perhaps brutal questions, then there we are. So thank you for your support, and thank you for all your contributions today, whether in favour or not. It's been an interesting discussion. Thank you.
I just thank all members for another meeting of character building and experience and learning. And I had my first point of order from an experienced parliamentarian, so I was very pleased to get that from Martin. I've got the greatest respect for the man. So, and doesn't get the credit he deserves for the local green spaces, so I'm glad that was hammered home today. We're going to move this to the vote then. All those in favour of this motion, please indicate. Someone counting. Can you keep them up while they count, please? Thank you. Those against? Nobody against? How many abstentions? Okay, that is 18 for, nobody against, 7 abstentions. That motion is carried. Thank you, members. All right. Yep, sorry, we're going to go move into exempt session in a moment, and I'll read out the official wording that I have to, but I have been advised I need to ask members. We don't know obviously how long the financial matter at item 16 will take. There are members happy that we go beyond 1900 and we get a resolution to that this evening. I'm getting nods. I have to ask, that's part of the Constitution. Yep, thank you. So we'll do that. Harry, can you confirm, sorry, Mr. Mayo, can you confirm that we're no longer streaming to the world? Say it first. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. This one. Oh, I'm sorry, this you mean, yeah, sorry. No, okay, fine. For the benefit of the tape, in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972, we will now be adjourning into an exempt session. The public is excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items, as it is likely that, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the public are present, there could be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraph 3, Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, namely, paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular Could we please have a show of hands that you're happy to go into private session for the next meeting? That's unanimous. Thank you, members.